This is the show that will not end. Kuba Boguchowicz. Kuba said that Apple used to have many edits of one original. This is within the context of photos. Aperture had it and called it versions. You could have many versions of one master and it worked. This is with regard to what John was asking for last episode.
It's a nice reminder of what we've lost. For people who are in the Apple ecosystem and remember the days when Apple had a pro photo editing app, and then one day they didn't anymore. And Lightroom is great, and you can get it, and it's by Adobe, and it's good that there's competition in that market. But very often, I forget that Aperture even existed. If you had reminded me that Aperture existed, I probably would have remembered this multi-version things, because I did try Aperture a few times, especially when they got like that, where it used to share its library with iPhoto in some weird way that never really worked quite right. I kind of miss that. I wish that stuff would come. I wish iPhoto stuff would come back to Photos. And if you run out of iPhoto stuff to steal, you can bring stuff from Aperture. Like, it's all in the family. They've got that source code. Those people are still there somewhere, right?
All right. An anonymous person wrote in and said, I was speaking with an Apple macOS engineer, and they said they will or have been making better versions of the new MacBook Pro keyboard and using them in newly produced units without any public acknowledgement or change of model number. By implication, Apple will also be using these refined keyboards in any MacBook Pro keyboards. They said that this refinement of component designs is very common, and they said that it is often good to wait a few months after a new product is released so that you can get the revised versions of any components that were found to have had issues after release.
Why do they have to prove John right?
I like the idea of them, modifying the product but not changing the model number. Like, just to add an air of mystery, kind of like, oh, these are the good ones. Yeah, I know it's exactly the same part and it looks exactly the same and the model number is the same, but these are the good ones. Like, we learned so much about assembling the old ones that we put magic special dust in it. Like, I mean, they do. You do refine your manufacturing process. Like, you refine the assembly. You could even refine some of the materials for the pieces. You could source them from different places. This happens in the manufacture of any remotely complicated good, and I imagine you don't always change the model number, but as a consumer, this is like telling us what we want to hear. Like, oh, if you buy later, they're better. Like, I always believe that voodoo too, and it's always good to like wait a little bit, even if only from like the old style bad old days of American car manufacturing, where you don't buy the cars that were assembled on a Friday because the workers don't care that much and they just want to go off for the weekend, right? And so they don't do a good job assembling your car. The idea that after some company has been building a thing for some period of time, every part of the process of building it becomes refined, and the people / machine / whatever get better at building the thing, even if every single part of it is the same. And so you kind of don't want like the very first PlayStation 4 off the assembly line. Maybe you want the 7,000th or 100,000th versus the first three. But all those are things that are just kind of like modern day folktales I tell myself to make myself feel better about delaying purchases for a small amount of time. It's kind of the opposite of Margot's folktales that he tells himself to make himself feel better about buying things immediately. But we all have our stories to make us feel good about our decisions. Honestly, I would like to believe this, but I just don't know.
And by the way, in my defense, the MacBook Escape came out in October. I bought it in March.
Oh, look at you waiting 6 months. Woo.
Wait, which one? The first one or the second one? Because you did buy it before, you did order it before it even was shipping to anybody, if I recall.
Yes, that's true. But the one I actually own, the one that I didn't cancel and that I let deliver to me, the MacBook Escape, I ordered it in March.
Well, that's good, because the one you got, they've totally sorted out the sticky keyboard situation.
Yeah.
So this anonymous person would say, oh, Marco got the last bad one, but now they're using all these refined ones that have the same model number.
Mm-hmm. We are sponsored this week by Betterment. Investing made better. Go to betterment.com/ATP to learn more. Betterment is a smarter way to invest your money, providing investing advice through smart technology, automated investing service, and human advisors. They have changed the industry by using the same strategies that financial advisors use with clients who have millions of dollars, but now they're available to everyone. This includes smart rebalancing, global diversification and investments, tax-efficient strategies and tax harvesting, and so much more. Betterment's mission is to help you manage and grow your investments to build your financial future, all with low fees. So you lose less of your money along the way. Because, if you do the math, typical investment fees and costs really add up over time. And Betterment's fees are a fraction of the cost of other financial services. And Betterment is so easy to use that they've won awards for their customer experience. You can even see for yourself by logging into a demo account right on the website if you're curious. And for a limited time, if you sign up for Betterment, you may qualify for a free Canary home security system. So terms and conditions do apply, and investing involves risk. To learn more, visit betterment.com/ATP. That's betterment.com/ATP. Betterment, investing made better.
Let's start the show proper. Let's do what we really need to do. Let's do what we've been waiting on for several months now. Let's talk about software methodologies. Marco, why don't you start?
I believe in fully test-driven, agile, stand-up parking lot development.
Oh, God, stop. Okay, so let's talk about WWDC. So for some reason you don't know what we're talking about, WWDC is a Worldwide Developer Conference. It is happening next week as we record this in San Jose, California. First time that any of us have been to San Jose for DubDub. It did happen there back in the days before anyone really cared about Apple. Don't write me. But now we're coming back to San Jose. It's going to be a new experience for all of us. And there's a lot to talk about. There's a lot of stuff going on. And there's been surprisingly little chatter about what's forthcoming. And I bet you if you were to listen to past episodes, I bet you I've said that the last several years. But man, sitting here now, the way I remember the chatter leading up to iOS 10, iOS 9, and 8 and 7, I feel like we knew a lot more about what was going into those releases than we do what's going into iOS, what presumably will be iOS 11. Do you guys feel the same way?
Yeah, especially because, first of all, it's a little bit weird. Like, we've heard a lot of kind of like weak second-tier rumors, but very little of much credibility or of much certainty. And it seems like, and the rumors are so spread out and relatively diverse in their nature. Like, it isn't like all about one product or all about one thing, that it's looking like it's going to be a potentially pretty big WWDC, but that nobody can really say for sure exactly why, which is kind of interesting.
Yeah.
It's kind of fun that way. Like, we have a whole bunch of things that we've heard might happen or are supposed to or intended to happen maybe, but really nothing that's concrete as a lot of previous leaks and reports have been.
We can make it up in volume. Like, you're right, there's no like big spearhead, like the one big thing everyone's looking for and then the ancillary things. It's just a bunch of other things. It kind of reminds me, well, maybe I'm misremembering, but was it iOS 8, the year iOS 8 was announced, and they announced all those features that we thought would never come to iOS, and there was, no one of them was the thing that we all held up, but just the fact that there were so many things in iOS 8 that iOS so desperately needed, and they all came, that it gave you the satisfaction of sort of, being overwhelmed with the sheer number of things that Apple was doing to improve its product. And we would all like that, right? But the problem with these big laundry lists where there's no one thing, there's just a bunch of other stuff, is it's not all going to be there. Like, we've heard rumors of everything. They can't possibly all be there. So there's going to be some disappointments mixed in, depending on what you care about the most, mixed in with the other stuff.
So let's go through this. Somebody has done a little bit of preparation in the show notes, and since I don't know who it is, and it couldn't possibly have been Marco, that by process of elimination means it must have been John, who shouldn't be doing any prep or research. Ahem.
But you haven't noticed I fill this document out before every single show? You think elves do that?
Yes, but yes, I did. I thought it was the Keebler elves when they were done baking.
Yeah. But anyway, you should now honor my organization here, because what I have written as the heading for the section that we're getting into here says WWDC hopes and dreams, because, as Marco pointed out, the rumors are all kind of wishy-washy. Like, they'll probably do some iOS stuff, man. Like, all right, yeah, okay. I'm not that interested in predictions, because if there's one big thing, we can be like, are they going to introduce the hoverboards or not? It's been super heavily rumored. Let's talk about the hoverboards, right? Instead, I feel like it's what do we want, or what do we think Apple should do in each of these areas? And obviously, we'll talk about predictions in terms of handicapping them, how they go. But I feel ill-equipped this year to offer any kind of prediction about what will be announced at WWDC, but I feel reasonably well-equipped to talk about what I would like to see, and then secondarily, what I think Apple should do. And then, like I said, inevitably we'll say, well, or could they possibly do this?
All right, so we're going to start, and we're going to go through software, and then we'll go through hardware, and then we'll go through, I don't know, kind of miscellaneous stuff.
Can I offer an opening statement?
Well, since you seem eager to, then please proceed.
Well, John
sir.
did.
Someone's ready for the incomparable.
No, that's way too intimidating. Basically, I slightly disagree with the hopes and dreams angle of this. I have kind of prepared my expectations to be things that I would like to happen, but that I also think will happen. Things that are realistic, that are plausible, that fit within Apple's, recent...
Hopes and dreams fits within that. I'm not saying like you want a hoverboard or you want them to roll the car out on the stage and do a donut. I mean, like we're all going to be within the realm of reason here. I think that was implied. If that wasn't clear,
right? And I do think before we get into specifics, I would say the general trend I expect this year, what I'm pretty sure will happen, like overarching themes, the most powerful messages that are being delivered. I think we're going to have a very heavy focus on Siri first and foremost, and it's going to take all sorts of different forms, which we'll get to down the road. But heavy focus on Siri, also a heavy focus on iPad productivity, and kind of integrated with that, iCloud Drive. And then I think secondarily we'll see things like the iOS potential redesign. I think the Mac is going to be, kind of mid-range priority, and then relatively quiet years for watchOS and tvOS. But really heavy focus everywhere on Siri, number one, and then kind of iPad productivity and iCloud Drive, like kind of number two.
So you're predicting that, but since it isn't just talking about overall theme, do you also hope for that? And secondarily, do you think that's what Apple should be focusing on?
Well, it depends. I mean, this is not only is this like, here's all the cool stuff that we've made this year, but, like every Apple event and like every Apple launch, there is a certain degree of marketing strategy that goes into how they present things, what they even present at all, what they name things, how things are structured. And I think Apple is facing a very, very strong competitive force right now on the voice assistant front from both Google and Amazon, and maybe even Microsoft, that, Siri has been criticized for being behind, most of it rightfully so, in various areas here. Also, Apple doesn't yet have a Siri cylinder / standalone speaker thing, and we'll get to that because that's rumored to possibly be announced this week or next week, I guess. So that might happen. But anyway, it just seems like Siri is an area in which kind of the current trend of the tech sphere that Apple operates in, this is like the hot thing to be working on, is to have really awesome voice assistant stuff. And Apple is widely perceived, mostly fairly, as being behind in that area. So I expect this to be kind of like the way last year Apple was perceived to be behind in machine learning, AI, big data kind of problems. And so last year, you heard them say machine learning like 1 billion times. They named everything machine learning. They bragged about how awesome their machine learning was. It was a hugely driven home talking point, and everything was kind of marketed around their version of saying, we are doing machine learning in this awesome way, and here's why, and here's how we're doing it, and look at all the machine learning we're doing. Similarly, I that's what I think Siri is going to be this year. It's going to be like the overall theme of basically everything being called Siri, just like last year where everything was called machine learning. Everything's going to be named Siri, even features that aren't necessarily what we think of as Siri today. So like maybe Spotlight will be renamed to Siri. Maybe search in mail or messages will be renamed to Siri. Who knows? Like there could be a lot of angles to this. I actually think it's possible that HomeKit will be renamed to Siri. So you would just say things like, this light switch works with Siri. I think there's a big chance of stuff like this happening, that Siri is what Apple is going to be beating us over the head with this year. This is going to be like the talking point theme of the year, and they're going to be all about how awesome Siri is, how far they've come, and how incredibly more advanced it is than everything else out there.
I think they're going to be throwing machine learning at us some more. I don't think machine learning's day in the sun is over. Like, in addition to Siri, here's the thing about the Siri focus. That's what I was getting at with, is this something you want to see, and do something you think they should do? Well, so by saying they're behind, and I agree, or they're both perceived to be behind and actually are a little bit behind in a lot of these areas. It's something they should do if they're actually concerned with keeping up with the Joneses. Many times in history, Apple seems totally unconcerned with doing the same thing as as its competitors are doing. In this situation, because Apple was pretty early out of the gate with Siri, like it's not like they just didn't touch this area at all. They're in it. Like they're in that market of like smart assistant thing that you talk to, and they were in it very early, and they have a brand and so on and so forth. So I think it's a situation where they can't say, oh, Apple's not interested in that market, like, or we'll enter it when we think there's something. They're already there, right? They're just behind. So if they can have a Siri focus, I think it is something they should. And if they can means, do they have the APIs and new, software things to do? Do they have Siri in a tube? Or, like, you have to have something behind it. You can't just sort of float on, oh, we've made Siri a little bit better and here's some demos. You have to have something. You have to have new APIs, it's WWDC, new ways for apps to integrate it. A new product would be awesome, right? And rebranding, I'm not sure they're going to ditch HomeKit in that way. And I don't think they care enough about the Mac to rebrand any part of it with Siri. I mean, Apple, macOS just got Siri recently. It's like, be happy for a couple of years, macOS. We'll pay attention to you later.
We'll get there.
But yeah, I think it is something they should do. And I think it's also something that I would want to see them do, because I like, all of us except for Casey, the holdout, have cylinders in our houses that we talk to. And I still occasionally talk to Siri on my phone and other things like that. And I would love for Siri to get better, and I would love for there to be other products and other APIs that incorporate Siri. Like I said last show, I would like to talk to Overcast and have it play things for me. So that kind of SiriKit integration with that kind of intent would be great as well. So that theme, and again, this is not, we haven't delved into the specifics. We're just saying, broadly speaking, iOS, macOS, hardware, software, Siri, machine learning, that type of thing. It's maybe not my biggest hope. Well, hopes and dreams for it, but it is plausible. It is a thing I think they should do, and I hope they do it.
So we might as well actually finish the Siri segment now, because I think.
How are you getting away with this? John usually stomps all over us if we don't follow the show notes.
Well, no, because he framed it correctly as a broad. It cuts across all these things. We're not talking about just iOS or just macOS or just hardware or just new products. It's an overall theme. He framed it well with his opening statement. The overall theme of the show. If you come away, and it is kind of a prediction, but I've brought it back to: is it something you hope for, and is it something that you think they should do?
So, since I sort of have the mic now, I will say that Siri does not do much for me either way. It doesn't actively make me angry terribly often, although that certainly happens. And it doesn't actively help my day terribly often, although that also certainly happens. So right now, I'm pretty uninterested in all of this. That being said, if history tells me anything, anytime I tell you that I am completely underwhelmed and uninterested in something, which may or may not also be me being nonplussed about something, depending on who you ask, I always end up becoming the world's biggest fan. For example, would you wait one moment while I check the time on my beloved Apple Watch? So we'll see what happens if they do release a Siri in a canister. But sitting here now, I just don't care. Not a bit.
So let's talk about the Siri in a canister, because this is very heavily rumored. It really does seem like not only is this a real product, but that this really might be announced next week. That is what the current most common rumors are saying. So first of all, I think let's assume for the sake of this discussion, let's assume that this thing is real. I'm going to call it the Siri speaker for now, because I don't even know if it's going to be cylindrical shape. If it's going to have a screen, a cylinder doesn't really make a lot of sense, so it might not be cylindrical. Who knows? So I'll call it the Siri speaker. Although I do think that there's actually a small chance, kind of a long shot, that it might be Beats branded. But I think probably not. I think Siri is the stronger brand for them, and they're going to want to use that here, or at least that's the one that they want to drive more. So first of all, the way I picture this product, if you think through how would you do things like configure apps on it? What kind of apps would there even be on it? How would you set it up? What would manage it? The way that the Amazon family of products does this is there is a Lady in the Tube named app on your phone. And it's not that different from Apple's Watch app on the iPhone. So it's like the companion app for the hardware product, which means this hardware product would need to be paired with an iPhone. That's what I think Apple's going to do with this product. I suspect that it's going to be like there's going to be a Siri app, much like the Amazon Lady Name app, and this will be like the centralized control panel. And I do think this is kind of just going to be iOS in general. Like you're going to be able to access the Siri app for other things as well. Like that could be a centralized control panel for HomeKit devices, which might be renamed Siri devices, any kind of integrations, apps, etc. I expect that to also then be, just like the Watch app is for the Watch, that'll be how you manage apps and configuration, advanced configuration of the Siri speaker device. Because if you have like a small, it's probably going to be like a small OLED screen on there. And it probably will be a touch screen and everything, but it's probably going to be too small and not that great for things like a full keyboard. I don't think it's going to be that size screen. It's probably going to be more like small status displays, maybe for things like timers, and maybe room for a few buttons, like a few big touch targets on screen, but not like, probably bigger than a watch, but smaller than a phone.
What makes you think it'll have a screen at all? Have you read more recent rumors than I have?
No, but most of the rumors have said it will have a screen, so I'm inclined to believe that it will. I also, having used the Amazon cylinders without screens for all this time, I do think it would be nicer with a screen for some basic tasks. There's still like the primary interface will still be voice, but it's nice to have a screen as a secondary information output device or an ambient information output device. So for things like watching a timer count down or displaying the weather all the time or things like that, it's nice to have a screen for things like that. I don't know if they're going to go full-blown like video screen for video calls the way Amazon has. I don't know about that because that whole idea kind of makes not that much sense to me. It's kind of ungraceful, and I don't know. I'm not sure I see Apple, even though they already have like FaceTime and everything, I'm not sure I see them doing the video call market with this device because they already have it on all their other devices. But anyway, I do suspect that they're going to have an iPhone companion app named Siri that will encompass all this stuff, probably even replace what is now called the Home app. It'll be just like the new Home app. Now it's called Siri, and it encompasses all the stuff, and it lets you manage your Siri cylinder. I expect the Siri cylinder to be primarily sold on privacy, the screen itself, and being good, because it will be the first screened one of these things to market, probably, or at least it'll be close to Amazon's that's coming out at the end of this month. I also expect Apple to push sound quality hard. Apple still has big foothold in music, and they have a lot of people there who care about music, and frankly, it wouldn't be that hard to sound better than the Echo. So I expect them to push sound quality hard. It is totally possible to sound good in a small enclosure, and I know that because I have a Sonos Play 1 speaker right next to my Echo that I hardly ever use anymore because it's so much less convenient, but the Play 1 is almost the same size as the Echo, and it sounds way better. It's not even close. And so I know Apple would have the expertise to develop something really good sounding in that size class if they want to. And they probably do want to, because that could be a great selling point. I would also suggest that this is also Apple, and this is also Tim Cook's Apple. So there is almost no chance there's going to be just one of these. It's probably going to be like the Amazon one with the screen is like $230, something like that. I'm guessing the cheapest one you can buy from Apple is $300, maybe even more, and that's not going to be the one anybody wants to buy. That there's going to be upsell models. Maybe there'll be like different materials, different colors. Probably they're going to be things like bigger or differently spec'd speakers. And that's what Sonos does. They have like the small ones, medium, big ones, and the big ones are really expensive. Maybe they'll even go as far as to have different storage tiers like the Apple TV, but that was kind of my comedy option. I don't actually believe they're going to do that. I hope they don't, because the actual storage tiers on the actual Apple TV are a comedy option that make no sense. So I hope they've learned, and I hope they don't do that here. But I'm guessing like roughly $300 for a base model, but the one you're going to actually want is going to be more than that for some premium reason, probably better speakers or something like that. And then otherwise, I think, if it runs, it would make sense for it to run apps. And the way they would probably do that is very similar to how the Watch is doing it. So the iOS app would be the host/container, and it would have a special extension that runs on the Siri speaker, and that the companion app would manage that relationship for you if you wanted to install or delete them, but that it would be an iOS extension that is not running on the phone. It's running on the speaker, but it's managed by the parent app on the phone and by the companion app. And then my only other kind of long shot on this, obviously they're going to heavily push Apple Music, and music is going to be, I think, one of the biggest selling points of this thing. I think long shot number 2, besides the Beats brand, is that they might even pull a Sonos and attack them head on and do multi-room audio from day one, which currently Amazon doesn't do at all yet. I know Google announced they were going to, but have they actually shipped that yet?
I don't have the faintest idea.
John, you're in charge of Google Home on this show.
I only have one of them. Why would I know?
Well, get a second one and then answer the question. All right. So yeah, I think it would be really cool if Apple did Sonos multi-room audio. Now that I've had a Sonos system for a couple of years, I do really enjoy that. Like, it's really nice to have speakers in multiple rooms of your house. So like when you're doing things around the house, you can have the same music playing on all of them. It's really nice. And the main reason I don't use that anymore is because it's so much more convenient to have everything voice controlled. So if Apple can combine those things, Amazon, I'm kind of surprised they haven't, but they haven't. So if Apple can be the first one to combine those things, and if they're going to have a heavy music focus, and if they're going to have good speakers in these things to begin with, that could be a really strong competitive advantage, because they're probably not going to be as strong with like the voice accuracy or the reliability or the speed or the third-party integrations. So they can try to get advantages in other areas where Apple is strong. So things like physical design, the UI of the thing, sound quality, multi-room audio, major music integration. That's where I expect Apple to go with this.
You have such a specific vision of this entire ecosystem of products. It makes me think you have inside information that we don't have.
So here's the thing.
That's a lot of specifics. That's a lot of specifics.
No, but I don't. But what I basically did was I started writing out this note of like, what I expect this thing might be. And then I started thinking about, okay, well, does it run apps? If it runs apps, where do the apps come from? And once you start thinking through, like, how might they do this?
Yeah, no, every one of those things sounds like, yeah, that's exactly the way they would do it if they were doing that. But what I have trouble with is you just listed out, if they were to catch up with everybody on all fronts at once, this is how they'd do it. And I agree. But it's like, I'm pessimistic that they are going to do that. Like, and what I'm thinking of is, of all things you described, it's like, okay, you're not going to get all this stuff. With the first product, it's going to concentrate on one area or another. So, for example, one angle could be, again, if this thing is even announced at WWDC, multi-room audio, no screen, Siri speaker, right? That alone seems like a version 1 product from Apple. Like, none of the other things you mentioned are there. There's no screen, there's no apps, there's no, HomeKit, central home hub thing. There's no, it's just Siri speaker. You can talk to it, and it's multi-room audio, and that's it. And they're expensive, and there's 2 of them, right? I'm on board with that. Or it could be a home hub thing, but then no multi-room audio, but just like one good speaker in the thing. Or it could be a little app platform thing that isn't a speaker, but that, it's like, I have trouble making myself believe that today's Apple is going to come out of the gate with something so comprehensive. But if they did, like, I agree with you that if they did attack on all those fronts, that's probably how they would attack on every single one of those fronts, because it's based on, something they've done before, technology they already have, things they're already good at, and enhancements to things that they, we're obviously assuming enhancements to Siri to go along with this to make it more capable just in general, right?
Well, but what I'm describing is a smaller scale than the first version of the Apple Watch. And it's way easier to make because it's this big chunky thing.
The Apple Watch was so incredibly hyped and rumored that it was like and it just, the Apple Watch came out and it did do all those things all at once, but the lead up to it matched that. Like, it was not, they built that whole temporary thing and had this giant special event for it, and we all knew it was coming. It was just like, and what is it going to be? Is it going to be a holographic wrist thing that floats on it? Like, it was out of control, yeah. Right? And they did do a really good job on it, and they figured out the software eventually too. But the Siri stuff is like, I wonder if Apple will ever have a tube thing. Maybe. Oh, I hear it might be at WWDC. Maybe it'll have a screen, maybe it won't. Probably have a speaker. Cool. Like it's getting back to like the scope of like, Apple could make a really good Bluetooth speaker, as I think I said a couple of shows ago. It's like, yeah, they could. if they felt like it, right? And you're like, no, Apple can dominate this whole market by doing everything in a super awesome way and just charging us twice as much.
Well, no, I didn't say that. I didn't say that because there are going to be major areas of this that Apple's not going to be competitive on because it's all based on Siri. And there are major areas that Siri isn't competitive on. Things like speed, reliability, and certain levels of intelligence.
Well, and again, like the underlying premise is that this comes along with a new and improved version of Siri. Like the Siri in this tube is better than Siri in all other places. And it's an interesting question of whether, say they even do that.
Oh, I don't believe that at all. I think it's going to be exactly the same Siri.
You think so? I mean, at the very least, I would hope that it would hear me better than the microphones in a watch or in the phone, just because they've got more room for more microphones, right?
Well, it might, but honestly, I don't have much problem with Siri hearing me properly. Like the words that I say are usually transcribed very accurately. It's what they do afterwards. That's usually the problem.
Yeah, I have some trouble with activations, but yeah. But like on the Siri tube speaker screen, whatever thing, I'm currently filing this in the category of a thing that I totally believe Apple has worked on and may still be working on, but that it would not shock me if there was no dedicated Siri-related hardware announced at WWDC. So I'm not pinning my hopes on this being a WWDC. Even if it's a thing they're working on, even if they are going to ship it later, I don't know. Like, just think of the Apple TV that missed WWDC. Remember when that happened? Like the new Apple TV, and they were going to have it for everybody, and it didn't quite make it, right? So I'm putting this in that bin right now, which would be a shame. But looking down the list of the rest of the things, I still feel like they would have enough stuff to make a good keynote without any serious stuff. And if they did have it, like, would they save it for the end? Is that the biggest announcement that they save towards the the end slot where the good stuff comes? Like they obviously like lead with like watchOS and macOS updates, and then build up to the stuff that we really care about, right? And this is the last thing. I guess we'll find out. But anyway, that's how I feel about the Siri thing in terms of predictions. That it will be more constrained than all the things that Marco listed, and that I would not be shocked if it didn't appear. And I'm not gonna, and I wouldn't. And honestly, if everything else comes out, everything else has reasonably good announcements of fulfilling some of my hopes and dreams, I'll be okay with that.
We are sponsored this week by Jet. Go to jet.com and use promo code ATP for 20% off your first 2 orders over $35. Jet is a really cool shopping site. They have a great selection, they have fast and free shipping, and they really optimize for everyday essentials. The prices are incredibly competitive. The prices drop as you shop, so the more you add to your cart, the more you can save. They have free shipping over $35, free returns within 30 days, and 2-day delivery on thousands of everyday essentials. And that's with no annual membership fees, no other fees. You don't have to be a certain, premium member or anything to get that fast free shipping. You get all the benefits without paying any extra price. And they have 24/7 customer service with the Jethead team in Salt Lake City. You can shop from your couch. It is very, very stress-free and convenient. And again, they have a great selection. So I tried this out, and I got to say, I was very, very impressed. I thought they would, maybe not have some really obscure stuff I was looking for, things like audio gear and stuff. They had everything I searched for. I was blown away. And again, their prices are extremely competitive. The shipping was super fast. And it's really nice, again, that there's no annual membership fee to get the best benefits. They have very competitive prices, very good ways to save money. You can even do things like micro-optimize the price. So you can do things like, if you're positive you're not going to return something, you can opt out of the return policy and save a bit of money there too. It's really cool. There's a ton of cool options. The more you buy, the more you can save. There's bulk discounts. It's pretty great. So once again, go to jet.com, and they have a cool offer here for 20% off your first 2 orders over $35. You can use code ATP at checkout. Once again, that's at jet.com. Terms and conditions apply. See jet.com for details. Once again, 20% off your first 2 orders over $35 with code ATP at checkout. Terms and conditions do apply. See jet.com for details. Thank you very much to Jet for sponsoring our show.
All right, so I'm sorry, boss. What are we doing right now?
iOS. Because we're going for the biggest. I feel like now, because Marco wanted to go right for the dessert and talk about the Siri, which is like, the new hardware, new product category, like probably the most exciting thing that could be announced at WWDC. Introducing a new product category that Apple wasn't in before, a thing that rarely happens. So we did that one, and I feel like iOS is the next biggest possible announcement, because there's a lot of rumors and ideas around iOS. Not just improving its capabilities, improving capabilities of the iPad, and adding features that people have wanted, and like getting back on the bandwagon of advancing iOS, but also the possibility that major foundational interface paradigms in iOS could be rethought, like particularly about how applications deal with files and drag and drop, which drag and drop is like not at all, and files is in a way that is not like the old way where there was no access to the file system, but is kind of this awkward middle ground. So there's a lot of rumors surrounding that. And again, when we say file system, we don't mean like the literal file system, which is APFS now, yay. But like in terms of file management, there's a lot of rumors about that. And any and all of those things are significant for iOS. And most of it, I feel like, is focused on sort of the high end of iOS, the devices that are big and fast and have a lot of memory, not so much on your phones. Like, what is this going to do about your phones? More about like, hey, I've got this big, powerful 12.5-inch iPad Pro with a stylus, but multitasking hasn't changed much in many years, and there's no drag and drop, and dealing with files is still kind of a pain. And for many years, there have been rumors about that being rejiggered, but this certainly seems like the year when the announcement, kind of like iOS 8, where the announcements for iOS will be things that have been a long time coming that are super impressive that people look at and say, A, this is going to change how I use my iOS device in a positive way, and developers are going to say, B, I can't wait to add support for that for my application, which is a perfect fit for WWDC. iOS is the glory OS, and they can start adding, for lack of a better word, pro features to iOS. The crowd will love it, developers will love it, users will love it.
Yeah, I don't know what to make of all that. I was asked by a friend of the show, Stephen Hackett, to do a piece for his members newsletter. And so I wrote a piece that I'll eventually post on my website, but probably not for a few weeks, about why I think that the iPad is not for me anymore. And since I just made this public declaration that the iPad is not for me anymore, I expect that whatever is done at WWDC this year will make me go crawling directly back to the iPad and tell everyone about how I never doubted the iPad, and the iPad has always been the thing for me. But I think it's obvious that this is going to be a year that's heavy on iPad. I think it's possible that Federico Viticci's smile may not fit through the doors on the way out of the keynote, which, to truth be told, is a good thing. I don't dislike the iPad. I just feel like I'm neutered, or not neutered maybe, but handcuffed is a better word for it, handcuffed by it. And so if a lot of the pain points that I have when using the iPad went away, that would be really great. But to come back to the ostensible point of all this, which is hopes and dreams, I do hope and dream for a better Siri API. I think it would be somewhat useful for what I do at my day job, but I think it would be super useful for things like Overcast. There's been many times that I've wanted to say, hey, Dingus, play, I don't know, Fatal Error in Overcast or something like that. Or, hey, Dingus, play Do by Friday in Overcast. And having the ability to do that would be really, really awesome. I'm a little disappointed that Swift is open source, in that, as far as I know, a lot of the things that I want from Swift aren't happening, because if they were happening, I would know them because open source. And so I'm hopeful that maybe some stuff has been happening behind the scenes that is Swift specific. I've been yearning for reflection. I've been yearning for async await. There's a bunch of other things that I've wanted that I can't think of off the top of my head, but every indication is that I'm not getting any of those things, because if I was, I would know about it because open source. However, that being said, any improvements to Xcode to make writing Swift a little better, to make using Swift a little better would be great. And I know that's tangentially related to iOS, but that
very
is what,
very tangentially.
Well, but
I was going to say, I rein you in, but I will allow you to make the bold prediction that there will be a new version of Xcode announced at WWDC.
well, no. But I mean, I want to see, like, as an example, they added, I forget the official term for the feature, but like the memory graph visualizer, and they added, the reveal clone, which is also excellent, and those are great. But that sort of a change is not what I'm looking for. What I'm looking for is something that makes writing Swift better and easier, like being able to refactor Swift code. Like, the fact that we can't do that is kind of preposterous now. And I've been talking to some people at work about Kotlin, about some of these other languages, about the way .NET matured. And if you look at the differences in .NET over the same stretch of time as Swift has had, I feel like C#, maybe I should use C# rather than .NET. C# moved way, way quicker. And I wish that Swift could pick up the pace a little bit, which is funny because maybe the only way for them to pick up the pace a little bit might be to take away some of the community involvement and make it more dictatorial rather than democratic. But anyway, I digress. The point I'm driving at.
I don't think that's going to go faster. You really think C# moved faster? Like, did it have backwards incompatible syntax changes as rapidly as Swift did? Because I feel like that was unprecedented.
No, I mean, it was additive anytime that C#. I mean, it wasn't always, but generally my recollection is it was always additive. And there were always humongous features in pretty much every version. Like, I don't remember the exact history offhand, but 1.1 didn't have generics. Then 2.0 had generics. That's when the language actually got usable. I forget what 3.0 brought, but then when you had link, and then you had async await. And so there's been
but you're up to, by that, Swift is in the 3 to 4 stage now, right? So
I'm talking in terms of equivalent calendar time, though. And maybe I'm misremembering. Maybe I'm wrong.
I think you have to check those calendar dates, because I think actually Swift has been moving pretty quickly, and I think it took a long time for C#. Check the timelines. I feel like the C# moved at a similar rate, but didn't break syntax as much, and went for longer until it got async await, and maybe even before it got link.
Yeah, I don't remember off the top of my head when link came out, but it was it has always been, to my eyes, moving quicker than Swift does. So Link was released as a major part of .NET 3.5 in 2007. So 2001-ish was .NET 1.1.
6 years. Swift hasn't been out for 6 years.
Yeah, that's true. That's a fair point.
It seems more compressed because in the past, and maybe IDE's was coming along better. But yeah, I think
it's truth.
So I expect obviously there to be a new version of Xcode, and some of those things that you talked about feel like they should be coming around this time as Apple turns the giant ship that is its DevTools division slowly but surely over a multi-year period entirely towards Swift. Still no ABI compatibility. Like, we're still waiting on that, but that's, as many people point out every time I bring this up, is more of a concern for Apple than it is for developers. People say who don't mind shipping slightly larger than normal applications, which I guess is everybody, judging by the App Store. But things like refactoring and other features that aren't available for Swift but have been available in some limited form for Objective-C, or seem like they'll be reasonably easy to do given that the entire IDE is built on the same compiler platform as the language and so on and so forth, that I expect people to be happy with the features they get there. But honestly, it seems to me from looking at those public mailing lists and everything that there is still a pretty big emphasis on the basics, compile quickly, correctly, without crashing, that type of stuff. That maybe they're still not quite in a position to start giving you all the frills that you want, and that's probably the best place for them to be concentrating. They're getting more serious about source compatibility now, and every developer there wants their thing to compile in a sane amount of time, and they don't want the compiler to crash, and they don't want there to be bugs. And I think we're coming out of that phase for Swift slowly but surely, and maybe they'll have some things to brag about. Like, look, I don't know, they usually don't brag about how many times Xcode crashes, but they will brag about compile times. Hey, look, you enable whole module optimization and compile this big project, and it was garbage on the past version, but the new WWDC beta version is like 10 times faster, and everybody cheers. It's always a crowd pleaser, WWDC, compile times.
Mm-hmm. But in terms of iOS directly, shrug. I don't know, man. There's nothing I can think of that I can point to that really grinds my gears on a daily basis, and I think that's largely because I don't use the iPad very much at all.
So do you think, so, if you're not an iPad user, or we're setting aside the iPad where we think Apple needs to do stuff and they will do stuff, I think that if they're rethinking how applications deal with and share their data, not the drag and drop business, because like on a phone, you still just got one app on the screen at the same time, probably, although who knows what the hell they'll do with the giant phone. But if they change how apps deal with data, that could surface itself on the phone. I'm trying to think if that would change something about how we use the phone, right? Like, because that wouldn't be a paradigm that only changes on the iPad. It would change everywhere across iOS. And if they have a good idea about how to do it, that would change the way we all use our phones in some small way, I imagine. Maybe even, God, I don't know. Like, I was trying to think of, like, what do we do with our phones? We deal with photos a lot, but we don't deal with them as files. We deal with them as these abstract things. So, yeah, I'm also struggling to think of any specific thing that they desperately need to do on the phone specifically to iOS, but I'm sure there will be something. And, obviously, neat new small features, performance improvements, bug fixes, all sorts of stuff like that. But we're not really counting those. But yeah, I feel like this will be a pro year for iOS if all the rumors are to be believed, and it should be, because that's where iOS needs the most attention.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that all the rumblings we've heard about the iPad productivity enhancements do sound very plausible. I think a lot of it could come to the phone. I mean, some of the stuff like side-by-side multitasking obviously won't be coming from the phone in all likelihood, but they could do drag and drop. What if they did some kind of thing, this is just totally random that I just thought of right now, but like, what if they did some kind of thing where if you like force pressed on a selected piece of content, say, then you got something kind of like what Expose on the Mac is, where like it kind of zooms out to like a grid of the last couple of most recently used apps, and you can drop it onto one of them, and then that pops in, and you can drop onto a specific part of the app. There are ways to do it on the phone. I'm not saying they will do this, or this may even be a terrible idea. I just thought of it now, so I haven't thought this through, so it could be terrible. But they could totally do drag and drop and inter-app communication and data sharing without actually having side-by-side multitasking where the screen is too small, like on the iPhone. So I wouldn't rule that out. But I would just say, like, in general, I'm very excited to see, if the rumors are to be believed here, the elevation of iCloud Drive probably into like the desktop or like the documents folder for iOS, and that is a really I think since the dawn of iOS, there has been this constant fight within Apple, probably from what we've heard, spearheaded by Steve Jobs personally, and possibly even Forstall, and kind of that line of thought of trying to get rid of having to deal with files. They have worked so hard to get rid of files, because files are the old way of doing things, and people find them confusing and whatever else. Files have problems just like everything else. But I think what we've found over the years is that people understand files better than Apple gave them credit for, and that so much of work that people do on computing devices really comes down to dealing with files. And no matter what you try to do with the app model, with having these little containers that the apps use their own data, that's kind of like fileless architecture, or that you kind of hide the files in these little dark places like the document picker that we have now, and you kind of reluctantly deal with files like as the system. I think what we found over these 8 or whatever years that we've had the iPad, that we've had iOS, 10 years. Wow, geez, it's been a long time. No, 11. Oh my God. Anyway, all these years that we've had iOS, I think what we found is that files are here to stay. That we can reduce the ways we deal with files. We can design apps that don't need to deal with files. And maybe that should even be the default way most apps are designed, depending on what they do. But that we can't get rid of files, that they're here to stay, that people use them, that they aren't necessarily even bad. Like for many types of work, that is less bad than the alternatives that we've been trying to shove down people's throats for the last decade. So maybe this is finally the time when Apple has finally embraced files on iOS, because everything they've done prior to this has really not been that. It's really been like reluctant, back alley stuff. Now, like, they, from what if what we've heard is at all true, it sounds like they have finally taken the step of making files easier to work with on iOS.
Yeah, that's definitely the rumor, but I feel like they already took a big step in that direction when they adopted a modified version of the Dropbox model with iCloud Drive. Like that was the big change. That was kind of, and not that I agree that it didn't solve the problem in the same way, but that was the turning point. I feel like where you could see from the outside, you could see, aha, inside the company, the argument that you just described, like the supposed Jobs forestall position, totally against files, that the tide had turned. Right, and obviously they couldn't come out at that point and say, "Oh, we've revamped the entire way we deal with files in iOS." Like that, it took a while. And a lot of these things, by the way, a lot of the iOS rumored things, a lot of them are like, "Oh, that was almost ready for iOS 10 and didn't quite make it." Like they have been a long time coming. Some of them could have, in theory, almost made it to iOS 10, but they have just, they missed releases, and so they've built up, and so now it's all landing now. But iCloud Drive did come out. It came out to the Mac and iOS, and it did change the way a lot of applications do with things. And you mentioned like the Dropbox picker, which that was something unheard of in the early days of iOS. So this could be like the coming out party for a strategy that was embarked upon multiple years ago and now finally, comes to fruition. And in terms of the files, like every time I think about different ways of dealing with files that are not actual files or not actual file systems and stuff like that, I think a little bit about Google's take on this, which I know is different because all their stuff is in the cloud. But what's the difference between files and documents? Like, well, there's not really any difference. Like, it's just alternate ways of viewing the same thing. But it's the way Google is pretty relentless about dealing with documents and documents that are organized into things that look like little folders, but at no point is there any abstraction that is identifiable as a file, really? I mean, even when they give you like a list view, like in my experience using Google Docs and Google Sheets and all that, Google Presentations and Google Drive at work with a bunch of other people, seeing how other people both talk about and deal with documents, Google Documents, is subtly different than how they talk about and deal with files, because we do have shared drives with files in them and everything. And I'm not sure one way is better than the other, but Google has made a pretty convincing case for me that dealing with things like documents, even with awkward, weird, shareable URLs, but the URLs that still work even if you quote unquote move the documents to a different quote unquote folder, like it's weird. It's like this weird half measure that I don't think is appropriate for iOS. But it shows me that it is possible to have a middle path that people find at least as usable and in some aspects better than the old way of dealing with files. Obviously, the multi-user collaboration helps tremendously I think it balances off the awkwardness of like that people would, in the grand scheme of things, people probably would rather be dealing with files and folders. But because Google does so well with live multiple person editing and permissioning on documents, that makes a group of people, like a company who are working on files together, forgive a whole bunch of other things. Unfortunately, I don't feel like Apple can bring that. If history has shown, Apple cannot bring the seamless multi-user editing of all data types with constant synchronization in the cloud as source of truth and blah, 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 blah in the style that Google does. So they have to bring something else. And this is probably a bad time for me to be pondering the future of an iCloud Drive style revolution for the entirety of iOS, bringing it more in line with enhancing its capabilities by taking the shackles off and not confining to a very simple paradigm. Because I just got done today reading a sad tweet thread from our friend CGP Grey about his battles with iCloud Drive and the amount of free space his Mac thinks he has, and also Marco with his potentially exhausted file descriptors, which may or may not be attributable to this. All this is to say that, at least on the Mac, iCloud Drive is still in the doghouse as far as I'm concerned, and I kind of don't relish that paradigm expanding much more until reliability gets better. But on iOS, I have to confess I haven't had any of those problems on iOS, and in iOS everything is much more locked down, and maybe it will be fine. But the thing you described, Marco, with like the force press and like the dragging onto things, if like you were talking about dragging data, right? Yeah. But if there is any kind of file picker interface, some way to grab one of those documents or files or whatever and bring it somewhere, seems like a necessity. And obviously that interface you described works even better on a big screen, because then you got the second hand to swipe. Like, that's the whole problem with, like, once you've grabbed it, quote unquote grabbed it, what if the thing you want to drag it to isn't there because it does the grid of thing, like, then you have to do, like, it's the springboard rearranging problem. Like, when you grab a thing to rearrange springboard and you want to rearrange it to a different screen, you got to drag it to the edge and hold it there, and generally it's an operation that people find awkward and unsatisfying. Whereas if you can grab it on your iPad and with your other hand swipe around to find the thing you want to drag it on top of, that works. On a phone, it works less well. So I almost think that interface you described, will almost certainly be a part of a bunch of demos, even if it's not files or data, but just like, there has to be some kind of grab a file and then zoom in or out to a different view and put it on something else. It can't just be side by side. At least I feel that way.
There could even be some kind of little like shelf thing to kind of temporarily hold it while you use the same hand to pick the destination.
Right. But I almost think that interface is actually better suited to a bigger screen. It's not to say they won't do it on a smaller one. In fact, they have no choice but to do it on a smaller one because, like you said, you can't split it. And even a shelf on a smaller one, it's, well, on an iPhone 5 or iPhone SE, whatever the hell that thing is called, you're going to have room for a shelf to put? I don't know. But I'm kind of excited about like I said, the coming out party of this file-based paradigm, because, and I think there's also no guarantee that it will be the solution everyone seeks. Obviously, nerds will love it way better, but we'll see. Like, again, with my experience with Google's products, nothing about them made people better about dealing with files, but it brought a bunch of features with it that everybody loves. And I guess the only improvement to the file paradigm it brought with it is sharing that people seem to be able to figure out, which is not true of like sharing and a lot of other systems, and the fact that you can move things around and people's links to them don't break, which is convenient. So I have kind of middle of the road hopes for iOS 11, but I expect it to be the true star of the keynote if there's no Siri tube.
I would also expect some degree of redesign. We've seen little rumblings here and there about this. I think if you look at the conditions that were right before iOS 7, so like the iOS 6 era, it was a time when the system stock UI widgets started looking more dated than usual, and there started, like, apps started coming out that people considered to be really good new design that was kind of fresh and different, that also was kind of converging on some similar principles. So back then it was like letterpress and Vesper, like these apps that were back in the iOS 6 era that were doing like, flat shapes, no big textures, mostly color and accent color based design, things that ended up being very close to what iOS 7 was. And then iOS 7 came out. It was kind of like the right time for it. Well, I think now is the right time for a redesign, not on the scale of iOS 7's redesign, but maybe on the scale of when we went from iOS 5 to 6. Because remember, iOS 6 was kind of a half step in a redesign. Like, it kind of it got rid of a lot of the iOS 5 extravagance of things like textures. Like, certain things were flattened and toned down and sanded away and things like that. So I think we're going to have that level of redesign here, because we can see, even if you look around, even Apple's own apps. If you look at iOS 10, the iOS 10 music app and Maps especially, I think, has a different look than everything else. And a couple of days ago, they released the WWDC 2017 app.
I was going to say, isn't that the thing we always do? Where we all look at the WWDC app and we say, this is what the new iOS is going to look like. And sometimes there's an element of truth to that, and other times it's not.
Right. But there are, I think we can see common elements that are now considered good, fresh, new design that are kind of being agreed upon or converged upon that are very different from iOS 7. Some examples of this would be things like kind of layered sheets with rounded corners instead of navigation controllers in iOS 7 that push big, white, sharp rectangles side to side. Now you have these like softer, rounded sheets that slide up. You pull things with swipes, and swipes are your primary navigation often for a lot of apps. You move controls. You scoot them kind of away from the edges and corners so much because they're harder to reach on big phones. This is a lot of stuff that I did with Overcast, and the reason I did it was because I saw this stuff happening. I saw this trend happening. I wanted to get ahead of it. You have buttons that look a little bit more like buttons. Like in the WWDC app is a great example. They're rounded rectangles they're not textured. They're just a solid fill.
Solid color instead of just an outline, because they went with just the text, and then there was outlines around the text, and now we're slowly creeping back up onto the old style button where it is a solid rounded rectangle with text in the middle of it.
Exactly. Yeah. Now you just have a flat shaded solid filled rectangle or round rect. With it's with a bold color too. It isn't like a subtle thing. It isn't a gray. It's a bold color, and it seems like apps are now kind of permitted to use more than one color at a time. Like the iOS 7 design was largely based upon using mostly white, some thin gray lines, and then you'd have one tint color. And that would be like your one accent color for your app. And you'd use that. So you basically had like single color design, grayscale plus one color. Now I think we're having multiple colors are now okay to have in apps again. And so, again, if you look at Apple Music, look at the iOS 10 Maps app and this new WWDC 2017 app, and I think you see this clear convergence of a refreshed design language that is not on the scale of iOS 7's redesign, but the same or more maybe as the iOS 6 redesign was.
I think you're going to keep I guess they have to probably in some way, the buttonless buttons, like even just for things that are in whatever you call the top bar where you hit done or you go to...
Yeah, the navigate. Yeah, that was a big question I had when writing this up, is like, what do they do with navigation bar buttons? Because in the iOS 6 days, they would have outlines and textures,
yep.
and I don't think that would look good here, but I think that can be done well. Part of the answer, honestly, might just be that navigation bars are going out of style, and that most apps are now using these kind of like sheets and cards and things that are not as often using navigation bars or not putting buttons there.
Yeah, because you can't reach that anymore. So,
right.
But they're still going to be in the OS. I think they're going to keep they'll keep them in the OS, especially for legacy applications. They obviously have to keep supporting them, and I think they will continue to be unadorned, because at this point, like, the bar itself serves as a pretty good framing device the tint color plus the bar. This is one area where I think they were right. Makes it pretty clear that by this point, if you have an iPhone for any period of time, that done thing is a button, and then you can hit it, and you kind of have an idea of what it'll do. One of the most awkward elements that was added recently, what was it, iOS 9, where they add the back arrow thing that they jam up into the upper left corner to get you back to the previous application. I would love for them to come up with a better solution for that. I don't have an idea for them, but it always strikes me as the most awkward Johnny Ive painting, inappropriately composed text jammed up into the corner. It's like the beginning of a kernel panic. Like, it starts just overwriting your screen with this tiny little thing. And I appreciate the functionality. Like, I use it all the time. It is good. Although sometimes it fakes me out, because sometimes I want to hit the thing that's in the navigation bar underneath that thing. That's not a fun operation to, like, carefully, here's the thing I do. Like, I go for my mail application and click a link, and then I'm into Safari. The navigation thing on the top says go back to mail, right? And then you're scrolling through the web page that opened in Safari, and you navigate, and you realize, I want to go back to the previous page in Safari. And yes, if you didn't have a case on your iPhone, you could probably edge swipe, but I have difficulty with that because I do have a case. So what I want to do is hit the back button in Safari, which A, isn't visible right now because I've scrolled, right? And B, when I find a way to make it visible, is nestled snugly under the back to mail link. So very frequently I go to hit the back button, and instead I hit the 2 pixels away back to mail thing, and instead of going back in Safari, I go into an entirely different application, and then I'm sad. So I would love for them to sort that out. Speaking of, there you go. There's something they could do for iOS on the phone, for small screens. Sort out that mess up there somehow. And if the solution is, like you said, navigation bars, the advice is don't do that because people can't reach them anymore. And here are different paradigms, either just, edge swipes or a lower navigation bar thing, or those rounded rect sheets or whatever. I'm ready for that, because I think that an iOS interface best practices shift that better reflects the size of phone screens these days is a little bit overdue.
Yeah.
The double tap to move things down, like, it was nice that they put that there, but that's another, like that little back thing, that's another, like, well, what can we do in the time frame of this release to help people with large screens? Well, they can tap on the thing and make the screen fold out. Yeah, all right. Okay.
Perfect, ship it.
That, I think, is the more embarrassing hack compared to the status bar back button thing. I think the reachability feature is so embarrassing.
I think it probably has some utility, but I just never remembered that it exists. The only time I remember that it exists is when I accidentally activate it. And then I go, I could probably benefit from using that intentionally every once in a while, but then I never do. I don't think I've ever used it intentionally.
Yeah, eventually I just disabled it. There's an option in settings to disable it because I would only ever accidentally invoke it, and it drove me nuts, so I just turned it off, and it's been fine.
So anything else about iOS?
We just assume 11. They're just going to keep going up with the numbers.
Yeah.
Somebody had an interesting theory. I want to say it was either Mike or Jason that everything will go to 11 this year. So it'll be macOS 11, iOS 11.
Yeah, that was Jason. I highly recommend if you haven't heard by the end of this episode, this probably 4-hour long episode, if you haven't heard enough WWDC predictions, I highly recommend this week's episode of Upgrade. There's a lot of good stuff in there.
Yeah, very much so. They do a whole draft. It's very funny, and it's very much worth listening to. I mean, the show is in general, but particularly the WWDC episodes are great. But anyway, going to 11.
They took the numbers. They took the Roman numeral off macOS, and I don't see why they'd put the number back on at this point. You know what I mean? Like iOS 11, macOS has the place names, and I like the yearly flavor. Honestly, it would be cool if iOS had those too. I know they don't do it or whatever, but it's kind of like a legacy thing for macOS when it had the code names, then it had the cat names, and now it's got the place names. And give macOS some fun stuff. It had to endure this terrible capitalization, squished up name so it matches all their other stupid OS names. At the very least, continue to give it the place names because there's lots of fun things you can do with that. If they were to get rid of that and just go with macOS 11 and iOS 11, it certainly fits with the uniformity story. Like I said, they want everything to be all the same, and look, now we're synchronized. But then what the hell would the 11 mean? Because it's not the version number, I can tell you that. Do they just bump the version number to be 11? I feel like they should have learned their lesson when they went to, from 10.9 to 10.10, and everyone's version number, everyone's incorrect version number checks in their applications got all freaked out to change the first digit from 10 to 11 in the version. I mean, I don't know. They didn't do it at once. I suppose they can do it, but it just seems like not a big marketing win because 11 is more boring than Sacramento or whatever.
I mean, I think changing the first digit makes total sense. As Jason said on Upgrade, if they're ever going to do it, it makes total sense to do it now, so it then matches the iOS version for future marketing purposes. Whether the first, right now the first digit has been 10. For so long, it's basically meaningless. You can just ignore the first digit; it doesn't matter at all. Which kind of raises the question of why even bother keeping that? What purpose is it serving? Just being 10 point something forever?
It's making people's incorrect version number checks continue to function correctly.
That was a Windows thing. That's why they went from 8 to 10. That's not a Mac thing. I mean,
on the Mac they had it when they went from 10.9 to 10.10. Because a lot of things would interpret 10.10 as 10.1 and being less than 10.9 because, it's not a big deal. They'll just, it's not going to stop them from doing it, certainly if they feel like it, especially for marketing reasons. But it's, I think the bigger reason to not do it is because place names are more fun than numbers. And haven't we all been asking, macOS, stop trying to keep pace with iOS? Would it be more comfortable if you waited a little bit longer between releases and got things settled because that's your role? Your role is the more slow-moving one.
But they're not doing that. They're already not doing that. They're already releasing them both once a year.
I know, but if they make the numbers sync, then that's like saying we're signed up for an unlimited number more years, where every year that they have to be in lockstep, and I don't like that.
Yeah. Well, anyway, what else do you besides naming things aside? I love that every year this discussion happens about macOS naming. It's always heavily discussed because it is more interesting, and everyone has an opinion, myself included, much more than we think we will. Anyway, so let's set that aside.
Know what the new default desktop backgrounds will be. That's the most exciting part of macOS. It's and it's kind of, I speak as someone who wrote reviews for the Mac operating system for a long time. I enjoyed the visual theming and branding, and on the Mac, the default desktop picture is the biggest, boldest branding thing of the running OS. On iOS, they do the best they do with branding is the lock screens they show in the PR stuff, and maybe the selections of the Springboard backgrounds, but they're always much more hidden than if you see a Mac desktop of it, like a newly booted Mac, even if it has a few windows open, the the desktop background is so dominant, whereas the Springboard background is much less dominant. So there's not much in iOS to massively brand the OS outside of the widgets themselves and the UI and stuff like that. So I do enjoy, like, you think you're making a joke like, oh, who cares what the default desktop background is in the Mac? That's a big part of the excitement of a new version of the Mac operating system for me. I don't know if I'm an anomaly, but like the big posters they put up with whatever the theme is, or the big waves from Mavericks and the cool pictures of Yosemite, and I like that stuff. And in the absence of them particularly changing the Mac UI, which doesn't seem like they're interested in these days, all we get is a cool name and a cool desktop picture, and sometimes that's enough to make an association of my mind that I will link those images and that branding and that sort of mood and theme with whatever features they add, whether they be, oh, this is the one that had Siri, or this is the one where they added Spotlight, or this is the one that had Time Machine, or this year, this is the one with the new file system that they won't even mention in the keynote. So...
So that leads into my next point here on macOS, which is, first of all, I think we all assume, based on how they did iOS's rollout and their promises last year, that APFS is most likely going to ship with whatever the next version of macOS is, and I would even say most likely even the default. And I would go a little bit further and say, what if it's the only option? What if you have to convert your boot drive? Other drives, you can probably do whatever you want. But what if you have to convert your boot drive to APFS upon installation?
I think that won't be that big of a deal because, A, we know they can do it really, really well, right?
Yeah.
So that it's not like it's going to trash people's data. And of all the things, B, like a boot drive, the only time that messes with you is if you frequently use target disk mode, right? Because every other way that disk is read, you don't have to worry that it's not HFS Plus anymore. Target disk mode, all of a sudden your other Macs can't read it anymore if they're not upgraded as well, right? But if you're sharing it, like it's SMB or whatever, like it doesn't matter what format it is. And so I think that's a reasonable thing to do. I'm just wondering, like, what would be the advantage, right? Oh, this operating system doesn't have to run HFS Plus. Maybe if there's some kind of headlining feature that demands APFS, like the newly rejiggered version of Time Machine that's like way more efficient and stuff. But they have an old version of Time Machine that works with HFS Plus. I don't know. Personally, I don't think there's going to be the fancy new version of Time Machine that works with APFS yet anyway. So I think this is not the year for forcing default, unless there's some other feature that I'm not thinking of forcing the boot volume to be APFS. I think they could do it, but I'm looking for a reason why they would want to. Well, they would want to do that. Maybe simplicity. With all the Mac things, I just feel like, do they care enough about the Mac to be that aggressive with the advancement of the platform, or will they just, this is one area where they will take a slower pace. Like this year, APFS rollout, a couple new features that are based on it. Next year, if we're lucky, the new version of Time Machine that takes advantage of all the cool stuff, right?
See, I have a hard time gauging like how much of a big deal macOS is going to be this year, because there's a whole bunch of things that the Mac could, if they're going to be putting more effort into the Mac than they have been recently, there are areas that could be really cool. Things like a new Time Machine based on APFS snapshots and everything, and that's incredibly powerful. Like the things you can do by having a snapshot based Time Machine, and there's two. You can do not only the external drive backup, but even like just giving snapshot support to the internal Time Machine. Like the Time Machine on its own drive kind of thing, like kind of like mini Time Machine.
So they can get rid of the terrible local Time Machine hack that we all have running on our Mac laptops, whether we know it or not, which is, in my experience, extremely unreliable, and yet still there grinding away, trying to do something useful for you. And it's just like, oh, just please stop. And you can turn it off. Yes, I know.
Exactly. Like that. Like there's all this cruft in Mac OS because of having to do these advanced features on HFS Plus, that if they just make APFS the only option, that just your boot drive automatically gets converted when you install the next Mac OS, which is exactly what they did with iOS, then they could stop supporting a whole lot of that legacy stuff. Like it would be much better for their efforts to bring the APFS features forward if they knew the OS was only running on APFS. So I think it's plausible.
But they still have to support all HFS Plus anyway, because you can time machine back up external volumes, and they're going to be HFS Plus and so on and so forth. So like, it's not like they can get rid of all that legacy cruft code anytime soon. That's why I'm thinking of like, well, what if there's a feature that they just like, they wouldn't want to have a feature that says, oh, let's demo this awesome new feature, say it's the new time machine, and also have to say, oh, and you can only use this feature if you convert your boot volume. That's the case where they would say, A, they probably wouldn't even mention it, but B, it would convert your boot volume no matter what. But even in that case, they still have to support the old crap way of Time Machine, because I have external drives that I back up through Time Machine, and they're HFS Plus, and asking people to, not asking, but forcibly upgrading their boot drive as part of the upgrade process like they did in iOS, you could swing that. Telling them, oh, and by the way, you also have to convert all your external drives, not going to happen.
Yeah, maybe. I'm still optimistic that they might require it on the boot drive, though. But anyway,
that's a question for me for prediction wise. Do you think the letters APFS in that order, all capitals, will appear on any slide or be spoken by any presenter? I guess it'll be spoken in passing, maybe.
Yes.
But will it appear on a slide?
Yes, absolutely. Worst case scenario, it'll appear on the word cloud slide.
Yeah, it is. I mean, obviously in State of the Union and stuff would be. I'm just trying to think of the keynote. Does it make, because it didn't make the keynote last year, and that's when it was introduced. Remember, we found out about it when we left the building, and it was like, oh, and by the way, APFS. Like, what?
I remember that moment very specifically, yes.
I remember it too, but like the fact that it didn't make the keynote, not good enough for the keynote. Sorry. Replacing a 15-year-old, 19-year-old, depending on how you trace it back to HFS file system, not important. It made the State of the Union, and it totally will this time too, and there'll be sessions about it, and I'll be all happy and everything. But that's speaking of hopes and dreams, give me this one. Talk about APFS, at least in passing, during the Mac section of the WWDC keynote. Do you hear that, Craig? Make it happen.
So here's a long shot. There was a thing that I think ATP Tipster told us forever ago that was like being considered, and I haven't heard a thing about it since, so it probably isn't happening. Long shot though, do you think they would offer iCloud Time Machine as an online backup? And here's one reason I think they might, besides the fact that they now would have the technical infrastructure with APFS to reasonably do it. I think one of the themes that I expect to see here is Apple pushing people even harder into subscribing to iCloud data plans, into buying more iCloud storage space, giving more and more compelling reasons for people to start paying Apple $3, $5, $10, or $20 a month for this iCloud storage space, because there's going to be more and more features that can use it. iCloud Time Machine would use a ton of it. So what if they did that?
Oh, they're totally going to do that. It's just a question of whether it's this year or not. And speaking of Apple services, we still always complain about their pricing and how they're sometimes competitive, sometimes not, depending on the year, depending on the thing you're looking at, depending on how you're measuring it. But I've always felt like the Apple way to do things, and we mentioned this many times in the context of iOS, and now I think of it again in the context of iCloud Time Machine, is not to buy an amount of space, because that's a techie nerd thing and people don't like to think about that, especially because it's like more price, higher price for more, but to sell a backup my Mac plan, right? Like, like Backblaze or any of these other things do. Like, You don't buy based on space, you buy based on, I want to back up this Mac. Like, you buy like a membership in a club. And then you break the association between, like Apple loves to do, break the association between the dollar amount and a spec. Right? The dollar amount and storage space. And now it's the dollar amount and a result. And the result is your Mac is part of the iCloud backup cloud. And just like your phone is backed up to the cloud, your Mac is backed up. Obviously, the phone has the same problem, that you buy storage space and people run out of it and they freak out. And we've talked about this a million times. If Apple's going to charge more than everybody else, the way to hide that extra cost is to, essentially like go unlimited, but not really. Like to make it that you're buying the result. And obviously how much storage space you would use would be based on the size of your boot drive or your device, or obviously there would be a limit, and there, you know what I mean? But like to frame it in that way, or maybe it doesn't have to be. Honestly, if Backblaze can do it, why the hell can't Apple, right?
Well, can't is very different than won't.
Yeah. Anyway, iCloud Time Machine has to come. I don't know if local Time Machine is even coming this year, let alone Cloud Time Machine. I think that is entirely a matter of how, because they could have done that years ago. Like, they could have done it badly, but like, they did it on the phones with HFS Plus, and obviously on the phones it's easier because you know exactly what you need to back up, and you can discard lots of stuff because you can get it from the store and yada yada yada. But Apple loves services, and you're right, this is a way to charge more for services, and they have the technical underpinnings to do a much better job of this. So it's only a matter of time and a matter of how much attention is the Mac getting.
Yeah, I really do think that what Apple wants and what they're pushing for more and more services revenue. Obviously, it's an area of growth that they can use that is probably easier to achieve than some of the other areas of growth to maintain because of different scales and everything. So they're going to be pushing this heavily as they have been in the last couple of years. I expect in general, I expect there to be things like very, very heavy pushes towards subscribing to Apple Music. That's going to be a big one. And I think iCloud Drive or just iCloud storage is going to be one of those things too. Basically, my theory is that within probably the next few years, Apple wants to try to make it so that using an iPhone or Mac or any Apple device without having a decent amount of iCloud storage space that you're paying for every month should feel like using it without an Apple ID. Like, there should be like all this stuff that you're missing out on by not paying Apple $5 or $10 a month for this additional storage. That's where I think they want to push this, and I think they will. And it's not like purely cynical. There's lots of great things they can offer once you do that. But I do think there's certainly a big motivation there to increase that services revenue, and that's going to be one of the ways they do it that happens to correspond to things that are also nice for users.
My stretch, hope, and dream for macOS, before we leave this topic, is I laugh thinking about this, but an announcement of vastly improved 3D API support, whether that be OpenGL, Vulkan, or whatever, like an inexplicable announcement, because they wouldn't have any hardware associated with it. It'd be like, why? All right, that's great, but like, no one games on a Mac and all your GPUs are really weak. Why are you touting your improved OpenGL support, like that you're caught up with the spec and that you're like... And we would know the answer is like there's another shoe that's going to drop, but that's called the Mac Pro that they're going to make someday, and maybe it'll have awesome GPUs, right? No, not DirectX for macOS. Blommer in the chat. I would be excited by that because it's an area where they are super behind, and they've been paying attention to Metal, and like I don't know. I don't predict it, but I would be super excited by that.
So I have a couple of stretch goals. I mean, first of all, we should, before we leave the more plausible section, we should also cover that I think the rumored iPad Pro drawing tablet mode is realistic and plausible for this year's release.
You're lumping that in with macOS instead of the iPad, I suppose.
Yeah, it's really a macOS feature. The idea behind this feature, as rumored, is that an iPad Pro with a pencil could be attached in some... I don't know if it's only going to be working over a wire or whether they can do it wirelessly, but
be able to do it wirelessly.
Hopefully. But basically, that can enter a mode where a Mac app can use the iPad and its pencil as a stylus surface of some kind. And we don't really know anything more than that, or whether this is even in for this year or not. But I think the way they would probably do this, if they're going to do this, would not just be that it would be like a second screen that you could just move windows onto. No, I think it would be more like the way they did the touch bar, which is it would be a separate type of output display / input display that apps would have to specifically write support for, so that they would specifically say like what would be shown on it and specifically receive the events from the pencil from it. So if they do it that way, I think it's a much nicer feature. I think it's better, and it would have slower adoption because you have to wait for all the apps that could benefit from this to integrate this potential new API. Just like the touch bar. But I think that if that works out, that could be a way better way to do it, and that's probably the way that they would do such a feature.
Yeah, like everyone's talking about it as the single phrase for this feature is, oh, you can use your iPad as a Cintiq, but a Cintiq behaves as essentially a monitor that you can draw in. Like, it appears as a second monitor. You can arrange it with the other monitor. The full UI of your Mac can be there. You can drag the little menu bar down to it so that it is actually your primary display. But that's not how you just described this feature working on the iPad. That it wouldn't just be... Because there are apps now you can get for your iPad that do this. Like, oh, your iPad is a second screen from your Mac, and now you can draw in your drawing app with the stylus because, of course, it's a second screen and you have input. This seems like a more... the rumors are of a more targeted interface, like you said, like the touch bar, that is specifically addressable by the applications. It is not just like, hey, every application gets this for free because it's just a second small screen, which they could also do as a mode or whatever, but to leverage the capabilities of the high refresh rate and the stylus input and all that other stuff, it seems to me that it is a better solution to have apps support it specifically in the same way they support the touch bar, to be able to draw a UI over there and to be able to have the iPad handle a lot of the drawing, the local drawing, to make it as responsive as we know the pencil can be in the good applications, having that collaborate with the Mac app. And it could be good, and it will make people's iPads, more powerful and capable. But not that I'm going to say this reminds me of the old world, but I think of that arrangement, and it seems cool and useful and a great way to leverage Apple's existing hardware with a clever software solution. But then I think of the Microsoft Surface Studio sitting over there kind of glaring at me, going, tapping its fingers, going, hello, guys, I don't know what you're doing over there with your multiple devices and your steampunk windows, but here I am, a giant screen, and you can touch me and draw on me and put me up. No, anyway, yeah.
I don't understand why this is something that people want. Like, I mean, for like artists and stuff, I guess, but why would a regular schmo want their iPad Pro as like a Wacom tablet for their computer?
Yeah, it's for artists. But I mean, in this, the way we're describing it, yes, totally for artists, because Cintiqs are super expensive, and I have one. They're not that great. Like, they're okay. If you already have an iPad with a stylus and you like drawing on it, but you also like Adobe Illustrator, the full version of which does not, or Photoshop or whatever, doesn't ship for iOS, just these cut down versions. This is an interesting solution to the Pro app problem, to get more people to buy iPads to use with their Macs that they might buy anyway, but this pushes them over the edge. Because if it doesn't work as a second monitor like a Cintiq, I don't see people buying it as a way to use your Mac through a stylus. And again, there are iOS apps you can buy today to remotely use your Mac, to use your iPad as a second screen, to use your iPad as a Cintiq-like device for your Mac. Presumably, when Apple implements it, they will do it a better job because they have, low-level access to all of that good stuff. And so that's what people are waiting for. And it is narrow, but like in terms of, the potential / promised focus on pros, both with iOS 11 and making iOS more capable on the big iPads and the Mac Pro, this seems like a move that is aimed towards creative pros and app developers who think they can make a cool application with this capability and think they can sell it for a fair price on the App Store.
Just seems to me like it would be a lot of investment for not a lot of return. I don't know. Maybe I'm missing the boat.
It's not that much investment, though. Like I said, I feel like they're almost there with the implement. It's third parties can do it. The plumbing must be there. Apple's just going to do the better, lower latency job of it and have an opinion about how it should be done, in terms of APIs and stuff like that.
I think it could be really cool, too. I mean, if you think about, obviously there's lots of artistic uses for this, and, and I wouldn't use any of those.
Oh, you want to use it to edit audio. I see it coming.
Well, I would try that, but I think there's a lot of areas of common tasks that people do that could benefit from being able to quickly alternate between pen input, especially really good pen input like this, like the iPad Pro, really good pen input, and also a keyboard and mouse, and to be able to kind of alternate between having that incredibly awesome pen thing that only has been available directly in iOS so far, but also integrate it with Mac workflows. That could apply to lots of things. That could be as simple as like if I'm working in Apple Notes, which I really like Notes. I've been using it more and more. And I did have one problem a couple months ago where like one device just wouldn't sync and it just was stuck for a long time. And I tried a bunch of crap and eventually it started syncing again. And I've heard a few other people who've had similar problems. So that's a little concerning. I hope Apple works that out.
Corrupt note that you must hunt down and expunge.
Right, exactly. Yes, who knows? But like one of the things Notes has is you can integrate doodles and drawings with the pencil and everything. And so like right now, if I want a note to contain a drawing, I have to go over to my iPad and add it there. But so like if I'm working on my Mac, that's kind of not convenient. But if I was working, in if I had this and my iPad was on my desk, I could just like reach over, doodle something, and then just put my hands right back on the Mac keyboard and go right back to work on the Mac. Not have to wait for a sync to happen up and down to the cloud and everything else. Like I'd be working in the document right here. Like stuff like that. I think there's a lot of potential workflows. Whether it's basic things like doodling or annotation, marking up documents. There's so many different things that aren't just like freehand drawing in Photoshop where this could be really helpful. Not to mention the freehand drawing in Photoshop, or even things like if you're drawing something in Illustrator, in a vector program where you're doing less freehand stuff and more kind of like drawing with math and parameters, but you do want to add a freehand element to something. It's easy to just add that and then go back to your keyboard and mouse for all the precise stuff. So I think there's, and this all might not happen because this all depends on lots of good, high-quality third-party integration happening. And that's always a crapshoot. You never know what developers will take advantage of and how soon and how well. But there's a lot of potential for this kind of feature. So if it isn't a massive deal for Apple to add this, if it's not like a huge 3-year undertaking where they can do nothing else, this would be nice to have, yes. And it's something that I think features that can really change the way people work on the Mac are hard to come by these days. So I think when they come by them, there's actually a decent chance, that as long as they're not massive downsides, they actually might consider doing them. So this I consider plausible, and if they if they actually do it, I think it could be really cool.
I haven't had a good Adobe Mac app demo at a keynote in a really long time. That's the old world. Wouldn't it be nice to come back to the old days and have a Photoshop demo on a Mac, granted with an iOS device? Fine. But
yeah, you gotta win some, you lose some.
They should run some filters and time them.
Now I do have 2 stretch goals. You had 1 for the Mac. I have 2 because it goes back to my earlier question of like, I don't know how much effort they put into the Mac this year. Like if they put in a good amount, these are actually kind of plausible, but that's, with the Mac, you never really know whether it's going to be a not even a big year, a medium-sized year or a small year, let's be honest. And so I think my number 1 stretch goal is the beginning of the iTunes replacement. Now, I'm not sure it would be complete.
You're getting greedy.
I know.
Greedy.
I'm not sure it would be complete in one pass. It would probably not be, but I'm thinking we would probably start seeing apps with new names that maybe the idea that the
Music.
iTunes
Movies.
app would still exist, but it would be like in utilities or buried somewhere. And then so like if you plugged in an iPod, okay, you here's your ancient app for your ancient device that
it would be the iPod app, a second app called iPhone.
Yeah.
It's gonna be the worst.
Yeah, but I think it's plausible this year. I wouldn't say likely, but plausible that we have an Apple Music app on the Mac. And what that is up in the air. It could literally be, like as the first version, it could be a fork and rename of iTunes with just the music stuff enabled and everything else stripped out.
And then mask everything else. All the code is still there. The preference dialog is still modal, but the app is now called Music.
It's an if-def at the top. So it could be as simple as that. Or it could be a total from scratch app that only does Apple Music. So it would only have the Apple Music streaming service. It would not have local library playback or even the iTunes store, because that's not Apple Music. That's different.
Yeah. And it would be a port of the iOS Apple Music app. Don't forget that. It would use UXKit for everything, right? It's like photos all over again.
Honestly, I had that on my list. Because if you think about it, like, one of the reasons why it would be hard to do this all in 1 year is that if they don't want it to just be Apple Music, if they want it to be Apple Music plus local library support plus store support, they would probably do one of those weird like iOS port kind of apps to the Mac, where it would be kind of weirdly iOS-y. Maybe it would use UXKit, or maybe it would use its own version of that, because that might just be for the Photos team. Who knows? It would be weirdly limited. It wouldn't feel very Mac-like, but it could be an Apple Music app. And I think that goes along with, obviously they'd have like a video app or TV for the Mac. They'd have the TV app, obviously. Duh. Why didn't I think of that? Anyway, and then also the iTunes podcasts were recently renamed to Apple Podcasts. So maybe there would be an Apple Podcast app on the Mac. So like, this stuff all makes sense. Like, and it's very aggressive to have all this, planned for this year, which is why this was like my stretch goal. I wouldn't say it's likely, but I do think it's plausible, and I do think that it is something they will get to. I just don't know when.
Sometimes I think about the sort of concentrated political capital that must be in the iTunes team at Apple, because like there's got to be a lot of important people associated with their product at the high and low levels. At various times in Apple's history, it was arguably the most important product that Apple was currently making and had ever made, like in the heyday of the iPod and everything. Like iTunes was where it was all happening, and then it managed to hitch a ride on the iPhone rocket a little bit. But like the fact that it has remained so long, and that every year it gets so much more attention than the improvements that are actually made by this attention seem to warrant. Like year after year, we've moved stuff around and we've changed the UI, but fundamentally have not fixed this application. It's like, there must be people working on it, and every year they have new things that they do, and every, like, not small things, they have big new ideas about how the UI can be different, and apparently this year they think the mini player should be not so mini anymore, and it's just always something, but the preference dialog is still modal and it's still old iTunes, and you just like, what is, there must be such a concentration of power there that power, and like the power to make these people continue to add features, combined with the neglect to say we don't care enough to make you do all those things that Marco just has said that are inevitable, but like we always wait for the first one to come. So the only one of those things I will believe is that an Apple Music app is the closest to not being a stretch goal. But all those other things, like I don't even know.
Well, I don't really understand how we could have somebody with a media app or a group of people with a media app pay so little attention to the Mac after years. Imagine being in a position where you have a media app and you just completely ignore the Mac. I mean, Marco, how could one ever get in that position? What would their headspace have to be to just completely neglect the Mac for a media-based application?
I think Apple has people who know AppKit, though. Like, that is key. Like, they're not going, AppKit, I'm scared. It's not like UIKit.
You could have stopped that sentence at Apple has people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Apple has a staff of more than one developer.
Well, haven't you heard you can charge way more for your Mac app?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, why don't you ask the other Mac podcast players how well they're doing? Booming market.
Casey will just have to pull a Twitterific for the Mac and just spend an obscene amount of money for his copy. Kickstarted,
right?
Yeah.
Well, truth be told, I actually don't really need it as much anymore because I've just been using my AirPods to connect to whatever device I need to connect to. So when I listen to podcasts, I connect to my phone. But in principle, we have to all agree that there is some amount of humor to Marco lamenting iTunes as Overcast for the Mac is simply a URL.
Not much, because, again, Marco is not the world's largest corporation, so let's just keep that in mind.
Yeah. Fair.
Now, if you want to talk about stretch goals, I have the mother of all stretch goals. This is probably
a Mac Pro?
No, I think the Mac Pro being released is more likely than this. But I have it on here.
This is going to be good.
In the realm of fantasy now.
My number 2 stretch goal, my final stretch goal for macOS, is significant improvements to the Mac App Store and sandboxing.
Yeah. Okay, sure.
So just brief background. So both the Mac App Store and sandboxing launched in 2011. I had to look it up. It was so long ago. 2011. They had a ton of shortcomings. It was really like they were both the App Store and sandboxing were really very, very rough 1.0s. And they have been completely untouched since. Like, they have been a rough 1.0 for 6 years. and so I actually did hear rumblings a little while back that there was an effort to actually rewrite the Mac App Store app and to really improve it. And we've seen, ever since Phil took over the App Store, there really has been substantial progress. And there was some before that, but now there's a lot of progress in the app stores. And I still think this is a very long shot for this year. I do think it is probably finally on the roadmap. I think somebody is finally working on this. The only question is when it comes out.
Are they racing the iTunes replacement team? Those two teams. I mean, honestly, the Mac App Store has a long way to go before it earns the stripes that iTunes have in terms of being the crusty old application that you can't get rid of on the system because it's essential, but that is. I mean, I guess iTunes does improve. Like, I laughed before, but
does it?
I mean, the Mac App Store app has been improved in ways that are not visible to users. Like, I believe that they have addressed reliability under the covers to make it not as awful as it was.
They haven't.
I mean, it is still buggy. I totally grant you that, but I have to think that there has, even if it's just messing with the daemons that are underlying the thing, because the Mac App Store is this strange application, like so many of these cloud-powered things, where it's really just a thin, partially web-based UI on top of a bunch of persistent processes that are running whether the App Store is launched or not, which is why you can click the update thing to update your things or install an application and then quit the Mac App Store app and your installation proceeds, because it's not your app that's doing it, it's just communicating to background daemons. And I feel like that...
It's also why you click that update button and just nothing happens.
Yeah, well, that's
just
a reflection
nothing
of the
happens.
Fact, right. But I think the reliability of it actually communicating to the background daemons and telling them to do their thing has improved over time. But I think it is plausible for them to do an iTunes style refresh where you aren't fundamentally changing the nature of the application in any way, but you moved a bunch of crap around and recolored some things, right? Or maybe you add tab support and just say, look, significant improvements to the Mac App Store, which I think does not fall into the category of significant as far as I'm concerned, because, like I said, it's an iTunes style update where it visually looks different and people think it's the new Mac App Store, but fundamentally it is still the same daemons and the same weird web-based UI communicating with it, and they just added tab bar support or some crap like that. I could see them doing that, but I am 100% willing to believe that the project is underway somewhere to massively improve the Mac App Store by making a new application with the same name that works way better.
I'm sure it's in progress, but I will be flabbergasted if we see it this year.
I still think my OpenGL thing is even more far-fetched, though.
Probably.
Of course.
Yeah. We are sponsored this week by Casper, an obsessively engineered mattress at a shockingly fair price. Go to casper.com/ATP and use code ATP for $50 towards your mattress. The mattress industry has for so long forced people to pay ridiculous markups for mattresses that you can, lie on for 5 minutes at a mattress store, and then, pay extra to have it shipped to your house and everything, and then you're pretty much stuck with it after that. Casper has revolutionized all this. They offer one perfect mattress. This is an award-winning mattress with over 4.8 stars and over 20,000 reviews based on Casper, Amazon, and Google reviews so far. This is quickly becoming the internet's favorite mattress. And here's why. It has a remarkably small box, so it's very practical to get. You can get it up narrow stairs if you need to. And they, of course, also offer adaptive pillows and soft, breathable sheets if you want those. And this mattress, the in-house engineers at Casper spent thousands of hours developing it with supportive memory foams for a sleep service with just the right sink and just the right bounce and a breathable design to sleep cool throughout the night. And people love it too because not only is it comfortable, but it's completely risk-free. They have free delivery and free returns with a 100-night home trial. If you don't love it, within 100 nights, it's over 3 months of sleeping on it, they will refund you completely and arrange for it to be picked up at your house. They understand the importance of actually sleeping on it, not just for 5 seconds in a store, but actually living with it and sleeping with it and seeing how it works for you, because you're going to be spending a third of your life on your mattress. So I highly suggest you check out Casper. They have free shipping and returns to the US and Canada. This is designed, developed, and assembled in the USA. And you can get $50 towards any mattress purchase by visiting casper.com/ATP and using code ATP. Terms and conditions do apply. Once again, casper.com/ATP and code ATP for $50 towards your mattress. Thank you very much to Casper for sponsoring our show.
It's weird because both for iOS and macOS, there's nothing I can think of right now that I'm like, oh man, I can't imagine them not delivering blank. I feel like, and I think Marco had talked about this a lot last year, that a lot of the low-hanging fruit has been plucked. And so at this point, like, what do we really want? And what it comes down for both, for me, is more about hardware than software. And WWDC in the last few years has not really been a hardware event. But that being said, what do we want from Macs this year? And I can tell you, I want a MacBook Adorable update. That's all I want in the world. Please, can I have a MacBook Adorable update?
Yeah, I think the hardware rumors are unusually strong this year. And usually in previous years, you are right that WWDC is almost always a no hardware event. But usually in previous years, when the hardware rumors would start up, Apple would shut them down with a carefully placed controlled leak so that there would be some kind of reliable report from the Wall Street Journal or something like that saying there's definitely not going to be new hardware announced. This is a software-focused event. And that hasn't happened this year. There's a lot of hardware noise, and there's been no denial like that or no expectation-setting statement like that anywhere. So I'm guessing that there is some fire under this smoke. The only question is which of the hardware rumors are actually scheduled to come out this time, like now, instead of the fall or some other time. And Apple schedule-wise, I don't expect there to be an event in mid-July or anything. Like, it's the hardware is going to either come out, or it's either going to be announced. When it ships is a different story, but it's either going to be announced Monday or in September or October. I wouldn't expect anything in the meantime there. So I would say the rumors this time are a little all over the place. The rumors are basically that everything is getting updated, but the ones that seem most plausible and most concentrated are the pretty much every modern MacBook and MacBook Pro. So the 12-inch, and then the modern generation of 13 and 15-inch MacBook Pros are all rumored to get Kaby Lake Intel CPU updates. That would be nice. It is, as far as I know, all of these parts are available. They're from Intel. Like, I don't think we're waiting on any chips being available or anything like that. I think it is therefore plausible for all these things to get these updates. There are some people who are saying no, it's way too soon. But the fact is, these all came out in October. They were already late even then, and going like 9 months between updates is not unheard of. They used to do things like that all the time when new CPUs came out faster, and Apple would get on top of them faster. So that is a thing that happens sometimes, not often, but sometimes. So it is totally plausible for them to update these things so, quote, soon. And if they do, everyone has this like wish list of things they want to be changed with the new MacBook Pro. We talked about this recently, so I won't go too far into it. But basically, I would expect no major external changes. I wouldn't expect different ports or more ports or the return of an SD card reader or anything that people want that was removed. I would not expect any external changes whatsoever. If they have revised the keyboard to fix the issues that I've been complaining about with reliability, especially with heat, I think if they fix that, they won't say so. It'll be a silent update. The one area that I think they might hit of like the main areas of complaints, well, two. One, I think it is possible they will offer a 32 gig RAM option on the 15-inch. Even though I think it still would need to use the higher battery draw RAM, but I don't think the battery draw, like, I haven't looked into the fine details of this. I don't think I'm really qualified, but the difference between the super low power RAM and the kind of low power RAM would probably only make maybe like a 5% difference to battery life off the top of my head. Like, that's probably the ballpark we're talking about here. And it makes total sense why Apple would not want that to be on all of the MacBook Pros of a certain size. But it would not surprise me at all if they have that as an option. So, like, if you want to trade 5% of your battery life for 32 gigs of RAM, fine. That's within the realm of Apple component options they've offered before. That's within the realm of different CPU options, or things like whether you get the discrete GPU or integrated only on certain models that used to offer that.
It would be great if they combined the 32 gig RAM option with the option for no discrete GPU. I don't think they will, but that would be a way to offset it maybe in future models.
Right, and that's one thing too. I also do think, I think, are the GPUs in Kaby Lake powerful enough to do an integrated only 15-inch now? I know because with Skylake, there was a thing where basically like Intel's integrated GPUs for that generation sucked, and so Apple probably wouldn't think they were good enough. I think Kaby Lake, they've improved them. And so one of the biggest complaints about the new MacBook Pros is that they've been more expensive than the old ones. So I think Apple will try to address this in some small way with not necessarily price drops, but lower spec entry prices for things. So the 15-inch would probably be the first one to get such a thing, maybe even the only one to get a meaningful lower price. But maybe they could do an integrated GPU only 15-inch like they used to do before, which I've always been a big fan of because the battery life is usually substantially better and more consistent and more controllable. So integrated only 15-inch. I do not expect a touch bar less, like 15-inch Escape. I don't expect that at all. Maybe later, like in a couple of years, probably not soon. But I do think having a cheaper entry-level configuration is likely, probably iGPU only, and then also a 32 gig option on the high end, and with no other changes to the lineup. I suspect that will address a lot of people's concerns. It'll really turn around the discussion on these, on whether they're pro or not. If anyone's still having that discussion, like I think Apple wanted to hit that, and I think they will in these two ways.
If it might have good PR, but looking at those actual changes, I think they actually don't address that many of the problems, because it's perception, like, oh, we'll lower the entry price, but if you get the 15-inch MacBook Pro you want, it's still really expensive, and we'll add 32 gigs of RAM, but it's not like we're making the thing thicker or adding more battery, so you're sacrificing for it and you still have to get a discrete GPU. Like, it is superficially making changes in the direction that people want, but it doesn't fundamentally change the trade-offs that these machines make. It just kind of, it's like better press, except for the 32, which is a capability they didn't have before. And so, kudos for that. Like that's going to be mostly a win. But I would still, be awaiting an actual revision that reimagines these machines with the new demands of the market in mind. Like what the cranky part of the market has been saying about these, like make a new set of machines that take that into account. And for the MacBook Adorable, I know Casey just wants them to revise it, and like whatever, they revise it and he'll get it.
Yep.
I'm going to put a 25% chance. It's not even going to be a stretch goal, but I'm going to say, like, I think it is plausible that there could be another USB port in that sucker. Not 50%, 25% chance, because they know it's a thing that people want. They're going to do it eventually, I think. This is probably not the year to do it. It's just like, oh, let's just do an internal swap, KB Lake, blah, blah, blah. But, yeah, just, I don't know. That's my max stretch goal, aside from the Mac Pro stuff, which we'll get to in a second. That's my max stretch goal. That MacBook Adorable, if it's revised, throw it. I have a vision in my head of Phil Schiller's understated way that he would have mentioned that. I wish I could do a Phil Schiller impression. It would be like, and we've got another USB port around the side there. Isn't that nice? Like, you know how he would say that? He would like undersell it, right? He would just like go through the slides quickly, not dwell on it too long. I'm ready for that to happen. But Casey will be happy no matter what. He just wants an internals revision.
All I want is to give Apple my money. That's all I want. It'll be
so exciting when you're like, yes, they came out and we can order them, and you get them and your key starts sticking. The shows we'll get out of that.
Oh my God. No, because I won't be able to bring it up. I won't be able to bring it up because if I do, then
we can tell when you type in chat and there's no E's in your text anymore.
Yeah, well, there's that. Now, if I bring it up, then I have to admit #Marco was right. And if we know anything about me, we know that I don't like to do that.
He doesn't have a hashtag. He's just got a broken keyboard.
Yeah.
There's the hash symbol doesn't work.
And it would only say Mark was right because my O key would be stuck down.
Oh my God, that's hysterical.
They're good keys, Marcus.
Yeah. All right. So what about the Mac Pro? Can we just get it over with? I don't have a drink handy, so let's make it quick.
My take on the Mac Pro is I still keep people hearing like, oh, they're going to tease the Mac Pro. I was like, what can they even do? I don't need anything from them. I'm patient. I'm content to wait. We already had our Mac Pro moment. We had our shows about it. There was a roundtable. Things were discussed. Apologies were made. Like, I think everything is fine there. If they want to tease something, get us excited. I'm not a monster. I don't object to being teased. I just have a hard time believing.
Oh my goodness.
I just have a hard time believing that there is anything worth teasing at this point. The best I come up with is that they have a logo. I honestly, at this point, I hope they don't have a case design that they can tease. I hope they haven't finalized that yet, because I want them to do a really good job. Like I said, I don't want them to rush to market with a box with a bunch of stuff in it. I want it to be cool in all the ways that a cool Mac can be cool, and I'm willing to wait a couple extra months for that, right? I have a hard time believing they have a case they could show. I have a hard time believing they would show the case. Marco pointed out when we were talking about this, I think in Slack before, he pointed out, like, well, they teased the 2013 Mac Pro, but I feel like that was practically a finished machine. Granted, it didn't ship for months, but they knew the design, they knew everything was going into it. Like, there was nothing, that wasn't like we're going to show you the case design of our work in progress. Like, that was the machine that shipped. Like, everything about it, right? And they're not at that point with the new Mac Pro, I imagine. So if they want to show a logo and a tone poem kind of video, like the little dots connecting iOS 7 thing that they showed 700 times, sure. But I don't expect anything, and I won't be mad if I get nothing.
Yeah, I'm with you on all of that, basically. I really think it's very, very soon to be showing anything meaningful. It would be nice if they did, but I would put the likelihood fairly low on that. But I do think that it's worth asking about the iMac Pro. In that Mac Pro press
That's
briefing.
why I had in the Mac section in the notes, I had laptops and then it said desktops. Ha! Remember Apple makes desktops?
But the iMac is overdue for an update, and they confirmed the existence of Pro configurations of the iMac during that Mac Pro press briefing. And those, I believe they said those were for this year. So the Mac Pro, they said not this year, but the iMac, I think they specifically said this year.
They can come in the fall still,
right? And so it's either now or the fall event. Basically, is when these are likely to be happening. I am still incredibly curious to learn what is a Pro configuration of an iMac, and how does that differ from the Mac Pro, and like how does this product not make either the other configurations of the iMac or the Mac Pro very redundant? Like, what is this middle ground? There are things they could do there, but they're all kind of weird and obscure, like high-end Intel CPUs and maybe like one or two Mac Pro features, but I don't know.
Slightly better GPUs, like
I don't. That's why it sounds. That's why I'm incredibly curious about what the iMac Pro is, like, and what makes it different from the iMac and the Mac Pro.
I think the joke I made in Slack the other day was pinstripe, but now that I think about it, Casey's matte black iPhone, put that finish on the iMac, make no other changes, call it the iMac Pro, people will buy it.
There you go. I'd probably buy one. That is possible that the iMacs could come out this event, but I think it feels. It's weird. It feels late for the regular iMac, but it feels a little early for the iMac Pro, depending on what they're putting in it. So I would say that's more likely to be pushed to the fall event. And there was this rumor that the MacBook Air would be updated with no changes other than it would get modern guts. And I think it's unspecified whether that means Skylake or Kaby Lake.
Same old TN screen, but modern guts, right?
And that actually sounds incredibly plausible to me because Intel at some point is going to stop making whatever ancient CPUs it has. That point is probably soon. So they're going to have to stop. They're going to have to finally put something else in here.
Can that screen manufacturer stop making that screen, please, so we can get an improvement there?
And if they would do such a thing, I definitely think that I agree with the rest of the predictions I've heard, which is that it will not be mentioned. It would be barely indicated even on the website. There might be the new badge.
Put a yellow new tag on it, right?
Yeah, at best. I think that would be the only change. I wouldn't expect Retina. I wouldn't expect USB-C. I would expect no other modernization of this platform except Skylake guts or Kaby Lake, but probably even Skylake, because they don't even want to be too modern with what they're putting in here. So that. I would not expect big things there, just a very basic update. And if you are a fan of the ancient MacBook Air platform, that actually would be a pretty nice computer if you don't care about anything modern or Retina.
And you don't have eyes. Yeah.
Right, yeah, exactly. But imagine if they don't actually change the case size or the battery size, that's going to get incredible battery life.
Yeah, that's what it's like. It's the danger of that thing. The longer you keep it around, the more people realize, if they just put a Retina screen on this thing, it would be Apple's best-selling laptop again. Shh, don't tell anybody. We wanted to buy these other things for way more money.
Well, the sad part is it probably still is Apple's best-selling laptop.
Yeah, I know, because it's cheap. But you know what I mean? It would be the one that back when we were all recommending 13-inch MacBook Air is the default recommendation, right? That we'd be in those times again.
All right, what do we think about the iPad rumors?
You just skipped over the Mac Mini. Let's just say no updates.
Oh, yeah, definitely not.
Was that seriously an option in there?
No, I mean, here's the problem. Like, all the stuff we've gone through, so many things were like, oh, maybe, or they could do this, but they can't. There's not enough time in the keynote for all of this, right? So,
well, but so, like, the MacBooks, I guarantee you we just spent more time talking about the MacBook Pros than they will.
Yeah, no, they wouldn't mention that, but, like, even just the stuff that we have mentioned, like, there's only so much time. They got a lot of stuff to cover. Whether or not there's a Siri tube thing, I just feel like we've overstuffed the thing with things that we think they're over 50% chance of being mentioned in the keynote already.
Yeah, and keep in mind also, like, the keynote is going to also have a ton of time consumed by things like retail updates. Like, and like on the talk show, Gruber and Dalrymple were speculating like maybe this is when they announce a major retail thing, and then maybe they have Angela Ahrens out on stage, and like that all sounds very plausible. There's probably also going to be some kind of Jeff Williams like social, medical, environmental good initiative, something like that. Like, so there's going to be time with that, and there's going to be demos of any new stuff they have, and there's going to be all these segments that will take up a lot of time, and so the stuff we're talking about is going to be squeezed into little like intermediate sections between it all. So like we're going to sit here spending 2.5 hours on this, but they're going to spend 20 minutes on what we're talking about here for 2.5 hours.
I think if they have a lot of announcements, I think what they'll do is they'll end up squeezing out the less tech focused things, because in the years where they have a lot of those, especially if it's tied to one of the tech announcements, fine, but not that they feel like filler, but you don't have the luxury of an extended segment about, health monitoring thing or whatever, right? Unless it's tied to, and by the way, here's the new Apple Watch with a glucose measuring thing. Like, that's the only time you get to have that segment. Or if you have a keynote that doesn't have a lot of stuff in it and they need some time to fill, they'll do that. But if anything close to what we've gone through is there, they're going to have to be super efficient to be like, we got a lot of stuff to get to. There's this. Like, that's what for the Tim Cook's little thing where he comes out and says stuff, I expect his spiel to be, we've got a jam-packed thing. We have a lot of stuff to get to. He always says that, but like to actually mean it or to emphasize it slightly more before he gets off stage and the parade of other executives come out.
All right. So any thoughts on iPad hardware?
So my prediction is that this is this year's iPad event. I don't think there's going to be iPads in the fall. I think this is the iPad event for the year, because it goes in with all the software advances that they're announcing. And
there's so much time left in the keynote, you might as well, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Might as well get shoved in there. I think the incredibly strong rumors about this 10.5 inch or whatever it is, 10 point whatever inch iPad being basically the new 10 inch class size, just bigger screen, roughly same body shape and size. That is so incredibly strongly rumored. It's very likely to be true. I think what we see basically is the new 10.5 is the new high-end iPad Pro. I think the 9.7 goes basically unchanged and just has its price dropped a little bit. Because if you look now in the lineup, we mentioned a couple episodes ago, there's this massive price gap between the new cheap 9.7-inch iPad and the iPad Pro and like the 9.7. It's $329 to $600. That's the price jump there. It's a huge price jump. So something's up. That seems like a temporary thing that we're waiting to be filled in with that gap by other things or by changes. So I'm guessing basically the existing 9.7 gets dropped in price, probably $100. So it's not going to close the entire gap, or it's not going to come all the way down to like 400 or anything, but it'll go from 600 to 500 starting price. That's my best guess there. So you have the 329 base one, you have 500 for the iPad Pro. Nobody cares about the iPad Mini anymore. Sorry, Casey. And then the new 10 point whatever will be 600. That's my best guess. One question I have though, is the 12.9 dead? I think there's a very strong chance of this. I think there's a very strong chance the 12.9 gets no update and is basically left for dead, similar to the Mini.
We will never hear the end of that on certain other podcasts.
I know. Mm-hmm. Well, no, they're all going to switch to the 10 point whatever, because it's going to be the same screen resolution and a smaller body. Because they all have 9.7s because they're better. Yeah. All of the 12.9 users that are like iMike and Vitici, they all also bought 9.7s, and in many ways like them better because the 9.7 is a way better size to actually hold.
Yeah. I kind of hope they kill the 12.9 and make an even bigger one because I want bigger.
I know you want that, but that's a different thing though. Like I think what I noticed with the 12.9, and part of this is because I actually did resell the one that I bought at a substantial loss. What I noticed with the 12.9 is that very quickly after release, it was being indefinitely discounted by a large amount of money at places like Best Buy and Target. And Apple does this sometimes to kind of unload things at lower prices that aren't selling very well. Like Apple didn't want the PR maybe of dropping the price so soon, but it was within a very short time of release that these other retailers that work closely with Apple and sell very large volumes were suddenly able to sell these things at like $150 below retail or $200 below retail. And this wasn't like a temporary weekend sale. It was like this was just kind of the new price. And it seemed like there was quite a fire sale going on the 12.9 very soon after its release that never stopped. So I'm guessing it did not sell to Apple's expectations. And I really think that there's a very good chance that if they're able to cram in the functionality of the 12.9 into something with that 10.5-inch screen, into a 9.7-inch style body,
which they will.
Which
that's
they,
the whole point
which,
of that form
yeah,
factor.
which all of the rumors say that that's exactly what they've done. I'm guessing that the 12.9 is not long for this world because...
Well, but you got to remember Tim Cook's Apple. All that means is they'll just keep selling it. Right?
Right, but what I'm saying is I bet it doesn't get an update.
But it's more than that, though, right? Because even though this Phantom 10 whatever inch iPad is theoretically the same screen resolution is not the same as screen size. And that's why, the iPad mini is the same resolution as a full-size iPad, and by that I mean the 9.7-inch iPad. But some people like the 9.7 and some people like the portability of the mini. And so I don't think just because this Phantom 10-inch iPad will have the same resolution as the iPad Mega, I don't think that by default means that the 12-inch iPad Pro just goes away. I think there are people like Vitici, like CGP Grey, like Mike that want a 12-inch iPad Pro in their stable of 504 iPads.
I think Vitici will switch. But, and remember, like 10 point whatever is much closer to 12.9 than the Mini is to the 9.7, right? Mm-hmm. In terms of area. I think all those people you listed, Vitici just wants the productivity, right? And I think he might take the size reduction as a win. Like, he just needs to be able to have two full-size things next to each other and blah, blah, blah. And he'll get that in the 10.5.
He still has young eyes.
Yeah. Aside from setting aside the random people that we happen to know, market-wise, the selling point of a 12.9 over a 10 point something that has the same resolution, maybe argument can be made for artists that you just want a bigger canvas to draw on because you're physically moving the stylus over the stylus, which is again why I argue for an even bigger one. But I'm having a hard time thinking of someone outside that problem domain who would actually prefer a 12.9 over a 10 point something with exactly the same resolution, especially if they don't update the 12.9's internals. And again, getting back to Tim Cook's Apple, maybe they just continue to sell the 12.9 because why not? And some people still want it, but it's really getting, if that 10 point whatever comes out, it's really pressing hard up against the 12.9, and it's pressing hard against a product that hasn't been updated. Yeah, I don't know. Things don't look good for the future of that product. I really hope things look good for the future of a larger size iPad. They just need to widen the gap a little bit because they're getting encroached from below.
I will also predict on the iPad section, I would like to see updates to the pencil and the keyboard. If they do, I would expect, based on what I just said, basically damning the 12.9 into nothingness, I would expect that it would only come into the new 10.5-inch size. Maybe the 9.7 would also get it if it could be the same size, like for the keyboard. But I'm guessing we get a pencil 2 and a keyboard 2 with improvements kind of all around. Not like massive earth-shattering improvements, but improvements. The keyboard, I don't know, better key somethings. I don't know. I loved Gruber's idea
to the keyboard.
I love that idea that Gruber kind of brainstormed on the talk show and then wrote up a big post. I love the idea of the trackpad that's only used for like cursor move. That's an awesome idea. I don't think they're going to do it this year, but maybe in the future. That's a great idea. And then the pencil, I would love to see improvements for the pencil. First, the smallest the biggest gain for me would be if there was some easier, better way to carry the pencil with the iPad. Maybe a sequel to the keyboard cover could have a pencil slot somewhere in it. Maybe. I think it's unlikely. But something that's more likely with today's Apple, that maybe the Pencil 2 gets better battery life.
It's not bad. It charges really fast.
It's bad if you don't constantly use it, but you carry it around with you. Then the battery life is really bad because the Pencil has no on-off switch. It basically tries to intelligently manage its power state based on things like motion and proximity to your iPad. If you carry it like in the same bag as your iPad, or if it kind of hangs out like on a table or counter next to your iPad, the battery is always dead because it's always like nearby and kind of in motion and ready to go.
You don't get the alerts that tell you your Pencil battery is running low and remind you to plug it in?
Sorry, your battery is always alerting you that it's 5% full. So it could really benefit from certain things that I don't think Johnny and I would ever add to it. Things like a power switch. I think it would strongly benefit from a power switch. I don't see that happening. So,
what do you think about smart connector or magnetic connections or other Microsoft Surface-y style things? Because I agree that's the problem. Like, what the hell do you do with your Pencil? And I don't think the solution is a bunch of loops or pockets and cases to shove it in. I want to be able to magnetically clip it, hopefully in a way that is still charging the thing. But, I mean, they could have done that in the original release, and they decided not to, which makes me think they don't want to put holes in the side of their precious Pencil to deal with the smart connector. Like, it's sitting right there. It's a place that provides power that has a magnetic connection points, but it's just too big and unwieldy for them to ward up their phone with it. But I also think that there's got to be a better solution for charging than the little spiny horn that when you plug the Pencil into your iPad and it makes this terrible, ungainly, horrifyingly breakable arrangement of hardware.
Yeah. I mean, the Pencil right now is... It really embodies much of the skeptical take of a Johnny Ive design, where it looks like a beautiful object in isolation, but the way you have to actually use it has lots of design flaws. One of them is, yes, it does still roll. It is weighted, doesn't roll very far sometimes, but it does roll. The biggest design flaw by far for me is that cap. That cap on the end that is very easily lost. If you drop it, it will break. The ring will pop out. The fact that you then, while charging it, have to take this cap off and you have nowhere to put it. It's not captive in any way. It doesn't hang on to anything. It doesn't go anywhere. So it's just begging to be lost as you charge the Pencil. Not to mention, the aforementioned way you charge the Pencil. Either you have to have this weird, gender changer adapter on a lightning plug somewhere, on a lightning cable somewhere, to charge it from a cable, then you have another tiny white precious thing that you can easily lose because there's nowhere to keep it. Or you do the thing where you shove it into the bottom of your iPad and have it sticking out, and as you mentioned, it's kind of crazy looking and really seems very dangerous and is very unnerving and doesn't charge as quickly. So there, charging the Apple Pencil is just a series of frustration and form over function design choices, and this would be alleviated largely if they could have one that didn't need to be charged as often. So, I think that's much more likely than Johnny Ive adding buttons or a reasonable charging method.
I just want it to magnetically attach to everything. I want it to magnetically attach to the smart cover if you have one. I want it magnetically attached to the actual device if you don't have it. I want it to inductively charge through those things.
That'd be great.
That's not coming, I think. There are pretty strong rumors of a Pencil revision, right? And I forget what the rumored things that they were improving about it. Maybe the charging thing was changed, but all of our wish list for Pencils is surely not coming. Because again, it's not like the smart connector didn't exist when the Pencil came out. It did, and they chose not to use it for various reasons. So I don't see them changing their mind on that. But yeah, what would you call it? The logistics, the packaging, the in Marco camera parlance, the handling of the pencil is pretty awful.
Yeah, and the Smart Connector is wonderful. One of the reasons why I enjoy the Smart Connector keyboard so much is that I never have to worry about its power state. When it's connected, it's on. It has no battery life. It's amazing. When I'm using my iPad, if I want to use the keyboard, I can just use the keyboard. I never have to think about it. I never have to wait for it to charge. I never go to it and find it uncharged. It's a thing that is no longer a concern. And so anything that can bring the pencil closer to that would be a huge upgrade for everyday pencil usability.
Anything else on iPad?
I don't think so. Again, I think this is the iPad event for the year. I would not expect to see, if the 10-point whatever inch iPad is announced, next week, I would not expect to see any other iPad hardware released this year.
I think this will absolutely be the WWDC of iPad software. I will go on record as saying I do not think we're going to see hardware. I think it'll be in the fall.
That's possible.
All right. iPhone, obviously no new hardware.
Yeah, that's definitely the fall.
Yeah.
Because if you think about kind of what we've pushed to the fall, I think makes for a pretty good event. So what we've pushed to the fall so far is iPhone hardware, almost certainly the iMacs, maybe Mac Pro info, but probably not. And then, we haven't talked about the Watch or TV yet. My best guess is that Watch and TV both have hardware in the fall. And then there also might be things like the rumored Apple Pay peer-to-peer thing, where you can pay people directly with Apple Pay. So if you think about that, that could be a fall event right there. New iPhone, massive iPhone year, right? So new iPhone is most of the event. Person-to-person Apple Pay, minor revision to the Watch, 4K Apple TV with 4K iTunes content, and iMacs. That's a fall event. So you don't need to also shove in iPads and everything else into that. That's enough right there.
Yeah, I think the iPads will go to fall only if they're not ready. I don't think they would delay them for the, I think they would announce them if they're going to ship anytime in the next 3 months. But if they're not, then, fall.
Yeah.
All right. So software for the Apple TV, anything?
The content deals is what we care about because the software and the remote suck and we all hate them and we have complaints. But what makes that device more or less valuable if they're not going to change the hardware? It's not as if they can put another new interface. It's all about the content. It's all about, I suppose the only software thing they could do is say, hey, remember that single sign-on thing that we touted and no one signed up for? Well, we got some of the important people to sign up for it. That's, I feel like, the only big software win that they could trot out that would have an appreciable effect on the life of people who are newly buying Apple TVs, to not have to go through that sign in, type these letters that appear on your whatever thing.
Yeah, I think TVs. It's going to be, I think, a very quiet year for the TV, for the most part, at least for the summer. I would expect maybe announcements of new content deals. Maybe we'll hear about that Amazon deal. Who knows? They'll announce some new partners that will all be cable companies and TV providers that none of us subscribe to. And now you can get to all these things with the TV app, but you still can't get to Netflix or whatever. It's going to be moderate updates to the TV app thing. They're going to really push it hard, but it's going to not have a lot behind it. And all of the, what I said a minute ago, I do expect this to be the year of new Apple TV hardware that can almost certainly play 4K video and would probably then at the event come with an announcement of 4K content deals with both iTunes and maybe other things like Netflix and Amazon. But I would expect that to be in the fall event, not next week. So very quiet on the tvOS front is my prediction. I don't expect any massive new APIs for developers or anything. Honestly, I think the developer story for tvOS has largely not panned out, and I think at this point it's pretty clear it probably isn't going to largely pan out. I think it's pretty much done and limited to major video apps and a very small handful of games.
Anytime they want to do 24 frames per second output on the Apple TV, sitting there waiting for them. You don't even have to do it at 4K. You can do it on the old model. Anytime. My radar that I filed for that I checked is still sitting there, marked as duplicate, never to be heard from again.
As with all things radar. watchOS. I would expect just a small evolution of what we're used to, kind of a deprioritization of apps, a a continued prioritization of notifications and things like that. Are we going to get watch faces this year? I say no.
I had that as a stretch goal, like as a maybe. I wrote maybe in italics, maybe third-party watch faces, but I think it's unlikely. And I do think too, like, you know, again, I think this is going to be a pretty quiet year for watchOS too. Last year was a big year. They had a lot to do, and they really did it last year. That with watchOS 3, that was a major update, solved a lot of the watch's major problems in a pretty good way. So this year, I would be surprised if we see more major progress. I feel like this is probably going to be like a down year for now. Maybe they'll do something like, you know, improve the design of the weird honeycomb app screen, or, you know, maybe they'll add something like third-party watch faces, but I think the more likely long-term goal is to add features such as an always-on, like, dim clock mode, or things like sleep tracking, or, you know, the rumored diabetes tracking thing, whether that's a separate add-on or whether it's part of the watch, who knows. But all of these things would require new hardware. Like, they're not going to add a new, like, always-on-screen mode that the current models don't have the battery power to do and still have good battery life, you know, like, all day. And I think having the screen always be on, even to a very dim level, and even if nothing's animated, and even if it hardly ever updates, that's still a massive increase in power draw. So I'm guessing the current models probably can't do that and still have good battery life for anything else. So I'm guessing that all of that stuff would wait for new hardware, which should almost certainly be in the fall, not now.
They could fix your audio player APIs, all your audio dreams. Right, that wouldn't be in the keynote, obviously, but that could happen at WWDC for watchOS. It's relevant to you, at least.
It could. I would love if they would make it easier for me to make a good watch app. Because right now, I made a watch app. It's okay, like with local playback. It's okay, and it could be good if they would, you know, bring over a few more of the iOS audio APIs, things like getting remote control events from headphones. You could, like, use the play, pause, or back forward buttons on your headphones, and that would actually control it. Volume control of the system volume level, not just the, like, local app 0 to 1 volume level that I have now. Any kind of now playing center access like you have on the Mac, or on iOS rather. There's lots of things they could do there, but I just think those are probably a really low priority for them, because I don't think anything on the watch is a priority that doesn't have to do with health or notifications. And that's probably with good reason, because those are the things that almost everyone's using their watch for, and those are the things that the watch is really good for. So I think those things get priority. Everything else is probably pretty far down the list, pretty secondary. So I wouldn't expect a lot of motion there.
Where, I forget if you had thought that watch, where does the watch go? Like the rumored watch with the special bands, and, you know, the next watch hardware revision, does that go to the fall, or does that go to next year?
I suspect fall. And you know, whether it's going to have, like, you know, the fancy blood sugar one, or whether that's, you know, a separate thing, or I don't know. I have no idea. From people who've been writing about this recently, it seems like that's a ridiculously hard problem to solve, and many companies have tried, and it takes a very long time. So it wouldn't surprise me if that part doesn't come soon. But they did watches last fall, and so if they're going to do something that would require new hardware with the watch platform, things like sleep tracking or always-on faces, so that you could, like, things that would need better battery life, things like that, I think this fall is a totally plausible and reasonable time to do that. Not to mention the fact that it's usually a big holiday seller. The watch sells a lot over the holidays, even more so than phones and iPads, I think, based on little bits and pieces I've been able to pick up here and there.
It's the new iPod.
Yeah, it is a massive holiday seller, so it would make sense for them to really try to get updates out there in the fall event, for right in time for the holiday shopping.
Yeah, I agree with everything you said, Marco. All right, so to kind of round this out and end the episode, maybe some, I don't know how to describe it, but like some touchy-feely, or like...
Wait, we're not done. We're not here yet. We didn't talk about services.
Oh, God. This is the show that will not end.
I'll add to the document.
Okay. Well, services. I think continued push to iCloud all the things, and continued grumbling from everyone involved about how successful that will be.
Yeah, and so basically my list of services includes a lot of things I've already said, things like heavy push towards iCloud storage and getting you to buy those plans, massive push to Apple Music. I think, you know, it's going to be, as always, Apple Music is going to get a lot of keynote time. It might not all be It might not all go smoothly, but it's going to be a lot of keynote time. I expect it to get another redesign. It's still going to be confusing, but
the keynote time will be like Apple Music, your home for television shows. Like, right? Because isn't that the pitch now? Like, it's Apple Music, come for our TV shows. What?
Yeah, right. So, and I totally expect them to do incredibly heavy-handed promotion of Planet of the Apps and Carpool Karaoke and anything else they might want to announce, any new production.
But you really think you're making a joke about the music app redesign, or you really think that's going to happen again?
No, I really think it's going to happen again. I think the music app redesign is the new iTunes redesign. Like, it's going to happen just every year, and it's never going to be good.
Does that mean I have to disable Connect in my toolbar again?
Probably. or whatever new social network they launch this time. So my prediction is very heavy-handed promotion of their Apple Music shows, of Apple Music itself. At least one really awkward skit or video. Something just really heavy-handed and awkward.
I hope there is just not time for this in the keynote. Not that I hope that it doesn't come, but I really hope that there is not time.
Oh, they'll make time. Beyond that, iCloud Drive, I expect, as I said, I expect it to be a big focus. I'm hoping that comes with some additional features. One of the big things for iCloud Drive, when I used it for a couple months, I am now back on Dropbox just for various workflow reasons. But when I was using only iCloud Drive for that month or two, the biggest things I missed were shared folders and public share links for files that I could just like get a share link to this file and send it to somebody. And again, shared folders for things like, let me share this folder with you guys and we can drop files here and work them together. This is something that Dropbox and its competitors have offered basically forever. It's a really big feature. It's not easy to do these things, but if Apple added share links and shared folders, those are major steps towards a lot more people being able to use iCloud Drive as their primary document sync thing and to replace or never even use in the first place things like Dropbox. So that I really hope they add that. That is, I think, within the realm of possibility. These are the kinds of things that Apple typically has not done aggressively or well, but they already have the concept of shared editing in Notes, and there are shared photo albums and photos. So there is this concept of inviting people to collaborate with you on a resource that is in iCloud. They have this infrastructure already in certain places. Let's get one more. Let's get shared folders in iCloud Drive. And I would actually say the shared folders are more likely for them to do than the public share links for files, because that's more of a
web thing, and Apple's allergic to the web.
Yeah, and they have, and it has piracy concerns and things like that. So I'm not sure they would do that. I think that's less likely. But shared folders would be a huge thing. I really hope they do that.
I'm still terrified of iCloud Drive.
Yeah, me too. Me too.
Also, one thing they might do for iCloud Drive is Time Machine. Because a lot of the other services like this have versioning for the files, some kind of recovery or point in time or versioning for resources that are stored in things like Dropbox. Yeah. It would be nice if they had that in iCloud Drive, and they don't now.
So they're playing catch up with a company that refused to be purchased by them that they called just a feature back when Steve Jobs was still alive. I mean, here we are so many years later, and they're still catching up with that basic feature set of Dropbox. Sometimes Jobs was wrong. He changed his did
mind.
Try to buy them. Yeah. It's more of a sour grape situation there. I feel like he was trying to bring down that you should be happy that we're even talking to you. Your thing is just a feature, but they were interested in buying them, so it's not like he was really saying your thing is
he was just trying to get it for a good price.
Yeah.
So I definitely think it could benefit strongly from these things. If they called this Time Machine for iCloud Drive versus if they called it versioning, who knows? Doesn't really matter.
That's confused. That's confusing, but we'll see. Do we have to go into a Starfield? I missed the Starfield. Do you miss the Starfield?
I do.
A little bit, yeah.
Because the current Time Machine interface is so boring, and when it doesn't work, it's less exciting.
I also think service-wise, Photos should and probably will have finally syncing of the metadata of the object recognition, faces, places, all that stuff, as we talked about last week. I also think that it is very likely that we're going to see a little bit of promotion for Apple News. It's a thing Apple launched that it's going somewhere, but I don't think it's going massively quickly there. So I think we're going to see a little, some kind of announcements of some kind of minor improvements here, and they're going to push us to use it a little bit more. And finally, in my services category, I think we're going to see stretch goal here, group FaceTime. Finally, we've had a couple little rumors here and there. Tipster's been talking about it a lot over the last year. I think this is finally the time for group FaceTime. Here's hoping that gets in. We had group iChat forever ago. That's now finally.
And speaking of iChat, I know this is like a dorky thing, but I would like to be able to share a document in the old parlance, right?
Yeah.
Multiple people, and also, hey, let's all look at this photo together, like to pull a photo from photos so we can all see it, right? That's a feature that I frequently wish for.
And maybe that would be part of the whole file collaboration, or the file management stuff.
Yeah, it's not collaboration. I just want to say, I can't tell you how many times I've pointed one iOS device at the screen of another to show my parents who I'm FaceTiming with a photo.
Yeah.
So they don't have to leave the app and because you can't do both at once. We have technology here. I should be able to throw a photo up here. Yeah, that sounds like the most keynote-worthy feature of all the service things, because I really hope they don't talk about Apple Music. But multi-person FaceTime, so easy to demo, crowd pleaser, everybody loves it. If they have it, it's a shoo-in for the keynote.
Yeah. And then finally, my final prediction for the night, I think we will hear absolutely nothing about iMessage apps.
Yeah.
They were announced last year, they launched, we got some cool fun stickers out of it, but I think the app platform itself, beyond stickers, has gone basically nowhere. There's a small chance we might see stickers on the Mac, in the Mac version of it.
But Mac iMessage parody would be another thing that they won't do because they don't care that much about the Mac.
Right. And it would never get the full-blown app platform. I think it would, at best, it would only get stickers. But even that, I just think the iMessage platform, it ended up being kind of like the watch. It ended up being used for a much smaller subset of what it could do than what I think they probably intended or guessed. And they massively over-designed this system for apps to plug into iMessage, when in reality, what most people want to do is have a few stickers and call it a day. It doesn't, and that hasn't been helped by the fairly awkward and cumbersome and unintuitive interface within messages to browse and add and manage your different message apps. There's room for that to make it a lot better, and maybe this would change things, but I don't think it would change things enough. I think ultimately, iMessage apps were a thing that they tried, but I don't. Similar to tvOS being a massive app platform, I just don't think it's really going anywhere.
I use the gift wrapped app in every capacity, including the iMessage app, a lot. I was really into stickers for a day. It wasn't a day, but it was very briefly that I really enjoyed stickers, and now I almost find it surprising anytime somebody uses one in a conversation I'm in. I don't have anything against them. I'm not opposed to them. I think a lot of people were when they first came out, but I too have been largely underwhelmed by iMessage offerings, with the exception of gift wrapped, which is as perfect as it can be given the world in which it lives.
I mean, in a lot of ways, the iMessage apps and watch apps and maybe even TV apps all suffer from the long-standing thing I always say, which is don't fight against the smartphone, or don't bet against the smartphone. In most of these cases, you could go and use this other kind of app for this app that you're trying to do. But in most of these cases, it's easier and faster, and it's already in your head. You already have the habits to just go launch the app and just do whatever you want to do from the app, from the main app, rather than going to these weird little extension points and doing stuff there. There are some cases where it makes sense to do that, but I think those cases are a lot fewer and lesser used than what maybe Apple intended or guessed when launching these platforms. And in reality, almost every Messages app I've seen that isn't stickers, you could just do it from the app almost as well, if not better. And turns out that's just what most people do. And it is possible to make an awesome Messages app, but again, the system of managing and installing them and everything is so cumbersome that a lot of people just don't do it. So I think they're fighting against the convenience and inertia of the full-blown app, which everyone knows how to do already, and everyone is already using for these things. So it's like, I don't know. I feel like it's a losing battle there.
Speaking of Casey and stickers and messages, it reminds me of the one feature of iOS that they do need to add that will benefit phone users and everybody. Emoji search.
Indeed. Fair point.
That would be a massive crowd pleaser.
It's almost like they think they added it when they added that thing where it suggests the emoji. Like, oh, we have emoji search. Just start typing the word, and we'll give you the suggested list of emojis. And it's kind of true, but that just feels like the wrong way to do it. Like, you know how many times I drag downward on the emoji picker expecting a search field to appear and forgetting for the millionth time that it doesn't, that it's the one thing on iOS that you can't drag downward to see a search field appear at the top. Oh, emoji search. Like, maybe I just need to memorize where everything is, but God, I spent so long trying to find popcorn the other day before I just gave up and did a web search for it so I could copy and paste it into a tweet.
Oh, my goodness. That's so sad.
I know it's in the food section. Can't find it. Tiny little images. Too many of them. Scrolling.
All right, so what else are we looking forward to? Maybe that wouldn't be covered in the keynote, or something that's different. So I'll seed the conversation with a couple of thoughts. I'm interested to see what San Jose is like. I'm kind of excited that Apple seems to be more involved with the ancillary goings on around the conference. They're putting up a booth for podcasters, which we will not be leveraging in part, but not exclusively, because Marco doesn't have a WWDC ticket, and it stands to reason you need one to get through the door to go to the studio. But it's certainly...
I think the bigger limitation is that it's limited to 60-minute blocks. There's no way our show is under an hour.
Yeah, certainly not. Given that we've just spent, 2.5 hours blabbing about what could possibly happen, let alone what will and did. But anyway, that's kind of cool. They've been over the years embracing community events like Layers and App Camp for Girls and the talk show and AltConf and things of that nature. So I'm looking forward to seeing kind of what San Jose brings to the table and what it has to offer. And additionally, and completely wildly unrelated, I am super excited to play Mario Kart against all my friends in person. And speaking of, Marco made a reference to his packing list for WWDC and actually had dropped an image in the chat room, which I forgot to add to the show notes, so probably won't be there. But I spied something interesting on that list, Marco. Would you like to tell us about that?
The list ends with Nintendo Switch and Pro Controller ?
Whose Nintendo Switch would you be bringing, Marco?
Tiff's.
Are you sure?
Yeah. No, I didn't get a second one.
Nope. No, I'm surprised.
It's
that's
what
I assumed.
It's our family Switch. Tiff is a wonderful, wonderful wife.
Wow.
And she, upon hearing the previous discussions, she decided to grant me permission to take her Switch.
Did Adam grant you permission? Does he even know it's going?
I don't think he knows. We will find out. But
just wait until he says, "Time to play Zelda, Mommy."
Yeah, then you're going to pay for that.
Yeah, I'm hoping that doesn't happen, but I know in reality it probably will, and it's going to be... Tiff's doing me a big favor here, and I will not forget that.
No, that's awesome. That's very kind of her. All right, so John, what are you looking forward to in the not keynote parts of the conference?
On earlier shows, I said warmer weather, but now that I've actually seen a weather report, maybe it's too warm. Because it's getting to the point where I'll feel like I'll be hot outside, but in the blasting air conditioning of the indoor spaces, I'll still need to carry with me something warmer so I don't freeze to death. So I suppose that's preferable to the WWDC thing where the outdoors is freezing. We'll see. But anyway, at any rate, there should be more sun at the very least. And maybe people will actually get to see the various nerdy t-shirts that I wear because I'll actually not be wearing the t-shirt underneath the long sleeve thing.
Excellent. Marco.
I'm incredibly excited to do all these podcasts, to do live shows out there, to meet people, to laugh at how big John's wallet is, all the wonderful things we get to do when we meet in person. I'm looking forward to that. It's going to be...
I'll show you my metal credit card.
Yeah, it's going to be fun, and I like seeing everybody, seeing all my friends, making new friends, and... I'm excited about Layers, and I'm going to that. That's going to be fun. It's going to be a very, very busy week but busy in all the good ways. We're going to have lots of, presumably lots of good, exciting stuff coming out of Apple. We're going to have lots of new APIs to play with. We're going to have a huge batch of new people installing my app on beta 1 and telling me how it breaks and complaining that I haven't fixed it yet. It's going to be glorious, and I look forward to this week every year. And yeah, thanks to our 3 sponsors this week, Casper, Betterment, and Jet. And we will see you next week, live from WWDC.
Now the show is over. They didn't even mean to begin, 'cause it was accidental. Oh, it was accidental. John didn't do any research. Marco and Casey wouldn't let him, 'cause it was accidental. Oh, it was accidental. And you can find the show notes at atp.fm. And if you're into Twitter, you can follow them at CASEYLISS. So that's Casey Liss, MARCOARMENT, Marco Arment, SIRAC, USA Syracuse. It's accidental. They didn't mean to. Accidental. Tech podcast so long.
So is it legal to wear shorts in San Jose? Because, I know, maybe we should ask the Europeans. I know a lot of people consider shorts to be a huge fashion faux pas, and that men should
Why
never
are we
wear
asking
shorts.
the Europeans? This is America, damn it.
Yeah, they don't really have weather over there. They don't have real heat, because they don't even have air conditioning. They don't know what to talk about.
They are wholly unqualified to weigh in on this particular discussion.
All right, good.
I don't care what they have to say.
So because it seems like the weather's going to be in the 80s, right? And whatever that is in Celsius, I don't care. You guys don't have hot weather. So in America, it's going to be in the 80s, right? Because to me, 80s means shorts.
Well, if you're spending your whole day inside an air-conditioned building, maybe you won't be indoors as much as we are. But that's my concern. That I actually will be hot outside with pants, but that there's no way I would wear shorts, not for fashion reasons, just because I would be freezing inside what is surely the super duper air conditioned whatever convention center where all the sessions are.
I see. This is the problem with shorts, is that you want to wear them outside, but you can't wear them in air conditioning because then you freeze. Not to mention the fact that half the world thinks that you're committing some kind of massive fashion crime by wearing shorts. Also, I will mount a defense of cargo shorts. I think that non-cargo shorts look a little bit weird. Cargo shorts, I admit, are not the best looking things in the world, but I think non-cargo shorts look weirdly flat.
I don't know. I think you have a cargo shorts fetish or something. I think non-cargo shorts look like shorts.
Oh my God. Marco, do you have any idea how much email we are going to get thanks to this?
I don't care. I'll be in California. I'll delete it all. I don't answer email in California.
Do you answer email ever?
No.
Yeah, I've gotten accustomed to the completely bananas San Francisco weather, which has perks but also has plenty of drawbacks too. This is going to be a definite change, and I think what it's going to amount to is I will probably end up choosing comfort inside over comfort outside, but you will probably see me rolling into these events with a light sheen on my face as I've gotten sweaty walking between buildings.
Yeah, there's going to be even more sweaty nerds, I feel like. That's a good safe prediction. Yeah. Sweatier nerds, WWDC 2016. 2017, whatever the hell year it is.
Yeah. Oh, man. We'll see what happens. But I'm looking forward to it. I'm super excited to see you two. I'm super excited to see all our mutual friends. I'm stoked. I'm happy to have a ticket to the big show this year since I missed out last year. Just super duper pumped.